Ryan. I had been counting the minutes because stopping felt too much like accepting it. 7 months, 3 hours, and 13 minutes had passed since the shadowed sunset pack became mine. 7 months, 3 hours, and 13 minutes since my father died on a forest floor with no one there to hold him, no one there to tell him he had done enough, no son beside him to take the burden before it crushed him. Every time I thought about it, the memory grew uglier. That did not make it less true. A rogue attack. Sudden. Brutal. Bad timing dressed up as fate. My father had gone for a walk, something he had done 1,000 times before, and the rogues came out of the trees before he could draw a full breath. Sometimes I tried to tell myself he had not suffered. I knew better. That was why I made sure the rogues who killed him suffered plenty. I stood at the window of my office with my hands braced on the sill, staring out over land that now answered to me. The training fields. The eastern woods. The rooftops of the pack village tucked between dark pines. All of it belonged under my command. Mine. I could think the word. I still could not say it. Saying it would mean saying the rest. That he was gone. That the title had passed to me because his blood had soaked into the dirt and never rose again. If I kept the words locked behind my teeth, some weak, ridiculous part of me believed the truth might stay unfinished. Maybe he could still walk through the door. Maybe I had not inherited anything at all. It was stupid. I knew it was stupid. I kept the thought anyway. Let grief leave me one foolish thing. My gaze slid to the maps scattered across my desk. They covered half the wood, corners curled, borders marked, notes written in my own hand. Another foolish hope spread out in ink and paper. I had searched more territory than I cared to admit for the one woman the moon goddess was supposed to have made for me. My mate. The person meant to steady the parts of me that had started to turn sharp. I was beginning to think she was not out there. Some wolves never found theirs. It happened. Rare, but not impossible. I could survive without a mate. Plenty of alphas did. I would be miserable. I already was, if I was being honest. Worse than miserable. Something in me had begun hardening after my father's death, and I did not always recognize the man it was making. The office door slammed open. I turned from the window at once, shaking the past off my face before Kyler could see too much of it. By the time my beta crossed the threshold, the mask was back in place. Alpha first. Man later. Our border was breached again, Kyler said. I was already reaching for my jacket. How bad? We moved into the hall without slowing. It was the third incident that month. The first had left 6 of my warriors bleeding in the infirmary. The second had been nothing more than one idiot rogue getting a single hit in before my patrol dragged him down. At this point, there was no guessing what waited for us. You'd think killing an alpha would earn them a day off, I muttered. Kyler did not answer right away. That made me look at him. He rubbed the back of his neck, which was never a good sign. It's not exactly an attack. I stopped walking. What does that mean? It's a girl. For a second, I only stared at him. You came to get me because of a girl? I tried to make her leave, he said quickly. She won't. She keeps insisting she needs to speak with you. Everyone wants to speak with me. She's hurt. Then send her to a healer outside the boundary. She won't say where she's injured. His mouth tightened. And she's not threatening anyone. She's just standing at the edge of the border. No weapons. No aggression. I don't have cause to throw her in a cell. A laugh left me, short and humorless. Trespassing is cause. Refusing to leave is cause. Pick one, Kentucky. He shifted his weight. It doesn't feel right. That sentence nearly snapped the last thread of patience I had. It doesn't feel right? Ryan, all she wants is a conversation. Kyler. I lowered my voice, because if I did not, I would shout. If we kept every rogue out of a cell because they claimed they only wanted to talk, we would not have a pack left to defend. You don't know she's a rogue. She's standing at our border, pretending to be injured, demanding access to the alpha. I stepped closer, letting the command slip into my voice. What else do you think she is? His jaw tightened, but he looked away. I hated that I understood him. Kyler had always been too quick to feel sorry for strays, wounded things, and pretty lies with trembling voices. It made him decent. It also made him dangerous in moments like this. Use your head for once, I said. Not your heart. Put her in a cell. If she wants to talk to me, she can do it from behind bars. I left him standing in the hallway. Every instinct in me told me to turn back. To soften it. To tell him I knew he was trying to do the right thing. I did not. That was the part no one warned you about before the title landed on your shoulders. Becoming alpha did not only mean learning to keep your expression cold. It meant teaching yourself to make choices that scraped against your own bones. It meant shoving people away when all you wanted was to hold on to the few you had left. It meant becoming harder because everyone needed you harder. A leader, they called it. Most days, it felt more like burying myself alive and calling the grave a throne. Sarah. When I was a girl, my father used to pick the most beautiful white roses and bring them home to me. I would put them in a vase and fawn over them until they died. I would mourn their loss, but eventually, my father would get new ones. The process repeated itself over and over, until one day, he didn't come home. Instead of mourning the loss of flowers, I found myself mourning something far greater. Maybe it was from all the books I read that filled my head with silly notions, or maybe it was my hope trying to hold on with an iron claw, but I was convinced he wasn't dead. He couldn't be. Nobody found a body, and no one could tell me what happened. I was left with the illusion that he was alive. Until I found him, he was still my, very much alive, father. For now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I counted in a whisper. Over and over, the same numbers. The same 5 words that were monotonous and blissfully calming. My nerves were almost as frigid as the air around me, and all I had to do was keep counting, keep walking, and stay calm. Don't think about what you're doing. Don't think about the lead you found and chose to follow. Definitely don't think about the house you're about to walk into. Dawn. Damn it, I muttered. The anxiety caught up and I slipped in the snow, my hands landing in the ivory padding with a thud. Well, that was graceful. I got up with a frustrated sigh before starting to walk again, and it didn't take that much longer before a giant oak door greeted me. I stopped counting as I stared, unable to do anything but swallow until my mouth turned dry. I raised my trembling hand to knock, but the door swung open before I got the chance. The rumors about the only man who made it out of the forbidden forest were insane and sometimes unfathomable. I never believed a single one, but looking at the man in front of me, I wish I had taken more caution. His beard stretched to his chest in knotted rivulets of greasy brown, and his shoulder-length hair wasn't any better. Dark circles painted the underside of his eyes, framing whorls of black that looked like they'd seen too much. My nerves started to creep up my throat, but I pushed them back down and said, "Good morning, sir." His dark eyes assessed me thoroughly until he seemed satisfied enough to say, "You are young." I cleared my throat. Thank you? I would like to. No. My brows furrowed at his interruption, and I opened my mouth to speak again, but he beat me to it. I will not allow such youth to cross past those trees. You know not what you are asking. Now leave. My hope flickered and sparked inside my chest, giving out with every second I stood here. Please, sir. You don't understand. My father. His face pitched forward until his eyes were inches from mine, and my breath hitched, my ribs tightening with the effort it took to hold my breath. Your father is dead if you think he's in that forest, girl. His hand reached out to push at my chest, and his beer-fused breath blew at my face as he said, "Get out of here, and don't even think about coming back." With that, the door slammed in my face. The cold of my car was almost unbearable as I packed up my backpack. I didn't know how much clothing I'd need, so I just packed it all. I was going to find my dad. I didn't need some silly map from a man who'd probably lost all his sanity. I had my gut, and I just had to trust that that would be enough. My eyes snagged on the picture taped to one of the vents. It was the only thing I had left of my parents, and I snatched it up before crawling out of the car and shutting the door. Okay, Bertha, I'll be back soon. I swallowed hard. Hopefully. It was just a vehicle, but I treated it like a plant. Talking to it in hopes that it might hear me and thrive. Stupid, but I guess that's what happened when all you had left was a car to call family. I do hope you're here when I get back, but in the case that someone gets ideas, could you maybe die until I get back? I didn't expect an answer, and I only spared it one last glance before I started walking away. Towards the forest of death. Snow, snow, and more snow. It felt like I'd been walking for days, and all I had found was snow. For a forest that was supposedly deadly, it sure was quiet. The only danger I had encountered was knee-high snow that seemed to freeze my very bones. Maybe the rumors about this place were just that, rumors. You're a little far from home, aren't you? Glowing yellow eyes stared at me from the dark of the trees, and I barely had time to gasp before a very tall man emerged from the forest on my left. He eyed me up and down before circling me, clicking his tongue as he went around. You look like a fun snack, but I bet you'd be even funner prey. He punctuated his words with a flash of his. Are those fangs? An audible gulp filled the silence, and he smirked, clearly amused by my terror. I don't want any tea trouble, I said, my voice shaking at the last word. He chuckled before saying, oh darlin', if you wanted peace then I would have stayed at mommy's house. Now, you have a 30-second head start, and I like to count fast, so, run. My feet started running before I was aware they even started moving. Tree after tree flew past me as I sprinted, not caring about the tall grass that flicked at my legs, the sky that was quickly turning black, or the sound of howling in the distance. I just ran, exactly as he had told me to. I was so stupid. Why did I think I would come out of this forest standing on my own? Only one person had ever made it out alive, and he was not well. My calves started to burn, and my breathing turned ragged, my heart desperately trying to keep up a stuttered pace, but I just kept running. Footsteps started to pound on the ground behind me, and terror locked my limbs, causing my foot to miss a step and get tangled in a root. I hit the ground hard. My hand twisted from the weight of catching myself on it, but I still used it to shove my body backwards, away from the man. He stopped 2 steps away from me, letting out an ear-piercing growl. I covered my head with a pathetic whimper, waiting for him to pounce, but he didn't. He just stood there, seething. You think you're so smart, don't you? Having the alpha on your side doesn't do anything but make you a better target. Watch your back, human, because this definitely won't be the last time you see me. And then he turned around and ran in the other direction. Question after question started to hit my brain in rapid succession, but footsteps from behind me had my body whipping around so fast that my head spun. Why the hell are you in our territory? Forest of Death? More like the forest of insanely tall men, because this made 2 encounters within minutes of each other. I didn't know I was trespassing. I was just running and... What is your business here? Business? What do you want? Something the man from earlier said echoed back in my head, and I said the first thing that came to mind. I want to speak to the alpha. Sarah. I had no idea what the word meant or if it was even a word, but the second it left my mouth, the man in front of me started to growl. That's right. He growled. Like a dog. The panic that had eased rushed back in with a vengeance as I slowly stood, trying desperately to keep steady despite the trembling of my legs. You have no right to speak that word, rogue, he practically snarled. Rogue? Why did I feel like I just walked into an entirely different dimension? I pulled every ounce of confidence I didn't have and squared my shoulders. I am not a rogue, and I would like to speak with the alpha. That sounded normal, right? The man paused before sniffing the air with a frown on his face. Was he smelling me? What in the actual? Kyler. A voice from my left shouted. Big, bulky, broody, and way too muscular. That's what walked out from the trees. He was at least twice my height, and I didn't even think he would have to do much but pinch me and I'd pop. I was going to die here. I was going to die alone in the forest and nobody would know. Stop fraternizing with the rogue and haul her ass to the pack house, Mr. Muscular said. She's demanding to speak with the alpha, and I'm not locking her up without a cause, the man I now knew as Kyler said. The cause is that she's a rogue. Something incredibly strange happened then. Kyler's eyes turned frosty, like fogged glass in the winter, and then Mr. Muscular's did the same. It went on for not even a minute before they both turned back to me. I swallowed nervously as they stared. Go talk to him, but be fast, and tell me his answer as soon as you get it, Mr. Muscular said. I blinked, and suddenly, Kyler was gone. How did he? Pressure on my throat hit me right before a tree trunk met my back. I gasped as my hands rose to grip his, but his hold was ironclad. Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but showing up here with a masked scent is a great way to get yourself killed. You just invited yourself into a world of misery. I shook my head aggressively as my eyes welled from the pressure. I tried to take a deep breath and failed miserably. I'm not who you think I am. He sneered at me, and everything within me recoiled. That's what they all say. He released me, and I dropped into the snow, gasping for air that couldn't come fast enough. Don't move a single inch, because, unlike Kyler, I will kill you on the spot. A shudder moved up my spine as I wrapped my arms around my trembling figure. I hadn't even realized how cold it was until then, and I couldn't seem to stop the shaking that overcame my body. Maybe if you gave up the charade and shifted, you would warm up. What? I don't understand, I whimpered. The weird eye fog thing happened again to him, and then he grabbed my shoulder and yanked me up. Looks like you get to see the alpha, but I can guarantee it won't be on your terms. I didn't know whether to be happy or terrified, so both settled in my gut as he pulled me through the forest. I knew I was being dragged into something I couldn't walk out of, but there was nothing I could do except follow the man in front of me. Adrenaline started to wear off around 20 steps in, and I had forgotten about the twist my hand took in my fall, but the pain that was pulsing through it wasn't afraid to remind me. The chills from earlier had only gotten worse, but I felt like I was burning up, which made no sense. You walk like a handicapped sloth, Mr. Musler grumbled. There was no way I was about to give him a reason to toss me by whining about my hand, so I said nothing. Have you finally realized you're not in charge? My body gave a violent shiver, and I wrapped my arms tighter around myself as I kept my eyes glued to the ground to keep the dizziness at bay. He chuckled at my silence, and I held back a whimper. He's gonna have some fun with you, isn't he? I swallowed the bile that rose. I would not show this arrogant bully how utterly terrified I was. I would not succumb to helplessness. There was a way out of this. There had to be. We walked for a while longer before the shadows ahead soon turned into buildings, and I was in awe of the hugeness of the space. There were so many houses, gates, gardens, fields. It was massive. People had always said that the Forbidden Forest was full of monsters, and trees that howled with warnings, and it could have just been my mind hallucinating from pain and exhaustion, but this town was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It was a whole life that lived just beyond our reach. Move. My wonder crumbled beneath rough hands and harsh words. No matter how beautiful this place was, it would most likely be the last thing I saw. Monsters covered in roses, I guess. We approached the largest building, and my eyes tracked 6 floors before I was roughly pulled inside. My head swam, and nausea threatened to push my stomach upward, but I breathed deep and slow, trying to focus on my surroundings. Marble flooring made my boots click lightly, and my breath was no longer fogging my vision. The walls were white. There was a twirly staircase to the right. I could see. Nope, it wasn't working. I'm gonna be sick, I whispered, and the man barely had time to move away before I was heaving my guts onto the marble. Geez, he muttered. You rogues are disgusting sometimes. The comment made me pause, but then another bout of sickness had me forgetting that he even spoke. Oh my goodness! A woman's voice sounded from my right. You poor soul. What happened? A warm hand touched my shoulder before it was ripped away. Not now, Kara. Miss Sickness here has a straight route to the dungeon after she's done hurling. You can be truly heartless sometimes, you know that? My job description doesn't require niceties, so I'm failing to see the problem. A scoff sounded right before I was yanked to my feet once again, and the room spun as we started to walk again. The rest of the trip was a blur of dizzying pain and more nausea, so finally being able to sit down, even if it was in a cell, was bliss. Welcome to your new suite. I'm going to get the alpha, but he tends to be busy, so I'd make yourself comfortable, Muscle said. His footsteps were the last thing I heard, and then silence was in the room finally. Maybe? I couldn't tell because my ears started to ring. My head got way too heavy all of a sudden, and it hit concrete as it dropped. The cold floor cooled my cheeks, and it felt so good to get a break from the heat. Maybe I was dreaming, and when I woke up my father would be right there, relieved that I came back for him. When I woke up everything would be normal again. At least, that's what I tell myself as my eyes shut, blocking out everything until unconsciousness took me under its wave of blissful ignorance, and I slept. Ryan. Their form is weak. Tristan jumped at the sound of my voice and then rolled his eyes before saying, I know. That's why I'm running drills on a Saturday. It's better than last week, and their attack stances have improved. I watched the soldiers in training for a minute. The punches looked tighter than last time, and I could see some footwork that had been practiced, as Tristan said. But every time they went to strike, I saw at least 2 open weak spots that could leave him dead. It's not good enough, I said, still observing. I want them training every Saturday until I see improvement. The rogues don't stop attacking just because our soldiers aren't combat ready. Tristan's eyes flared wide as his mouth opened, then shut again. Get them fighting ready, Tristan, I started as I walked away. I'm trusting you. That rogue on the border forced me to double patrols, but I couldn't use resources I didn't have, so all the soldiers in training were bumped up to higher lessons and a faster-paced learning process. I didn't love that I had to force them to adapt at an incredibly fast rate, but I knew they could handle it, and I honestly had no other choice. Alpha! A voice shouted from the left. I looked over to see Rowan jogging over to me, and I internally cringed. He had news about the rogue, but I would be lying if I said I didn't want to just kill her and get it over with. Rogues were a waste of space and time. Just because one sauntered over and claimed she wanted to talk did not mean we invited her in for tea and crumpets. What's the verdict, Rowan? I asked. He ran 2 hands through his hair before saying, I think you should hear what she has to say. The words looked like they physically pained him, and I didn't blame him, because I felt the audacity of them from here. I crossed my arms over my chest. Why would I do that? His brows furrowed and he hesitated, eyes flicking from me to the training field. Kyler thinks the stray is human. I paused, rubbed my jaw, then scoffed. How would a human make it that far into the forest? It's impossible, and Kyler told me her scent was rogue. He swallowed, and I honestly didn't think I'd ever seen him this nervous. Her scent was confusing because of the rogue that was chasing her. It must have rubbed off on her or something. All I know for sure is that she's currently sitting in one of our cells, and I think you should come down and at least decide what to do. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You brought a human into our pack? I said the words calmly, like the gentle breeze that warns of a storm. I had no idea she was human until Kyler talked to me afterwards. By that time she was already here. Believe me, I had no intention to. I don't care about your intentions, Rowan. My words carried, and I lowered my voice as I saw heads turning toward us. Whether your intentions were good or bad doesn't change the fact that we have a human in our pack right now. Do you know what this means? The danger that her presence brings? We haven't ever had a human make it this far in the forest, and you know why? Because they're supposed to be dead by the time any pack is in reaching distance. So how did she make it so far? His jaw clenched as silence filled the space between us. This wasn't technically his fault, but I couldn't exactly take it out on the oblivious human currently residing in our dungeons. What a mess. I sighed before saying, let's go. I want to see the thing that's causing all this trouble. Maybe she is a rogue and you and Kyler are just coming down with something that's obstructing your senses. At Rowan's cringe, I knew I was just wishfully thinking then. I stared at the unconscious girl for a long minute, jaw clenched and feet planted, trying desperately to ignore the scent that was pushing itself through my nose. The scent had started as soon as I stepped down the stairs. The scent that I had been searching everywhere for. My mate. My wolf pushed at my walls for the 100th time since we'd been down there, but I pushed back. Nobody could know about this, and as soon as I gave him control, the whole damn pack would be alerted, so I kept him blocked as I assessed the scene in front of me. If the girl's scent wasn't indication enough, her entire form screamed human, and I had no idea how Kai and Rowan didn't figure it out sooner. She was unconscious, but I was afraid if I asked why that was, it would come out as a growl, so I kept my mouth shut for now. Dark purple smudges lined the ring of her delicate throat, and my wolf pushed yet again. It took everything within me to keep him at bay. How long has she been like this? Unconscious? Rowan asked, tilting his head. My wolf growled and I slammed my walls back up. All of it, I gritted out. He rubbed the back of his neck before sighing. Well, I think she may have hurt her hand while running from the rogue. The bruises on her neck are from when I had a intense conversation with her. And I don't know why she's unconscious. Must have happened when I left. My muscles tightened to the point of pain as I simultaneously held my tongue and my wolf back. Nobody would find out about this. Ever. I cleared my throat before saying, I want her looked at by the pack doctor. He turned appalled eyes my way and asked, are you sure that's safe? Are you questioning your strength against a human? He swallowed hard. Well no, but she could run away, and since she got this far into the forest, I have no doubt she can easily find her way out. I internally cringed. This situation was so not what I thought it was. Restrain her if you wish, but I want her injuries thoroughly looked at first. I went to walk out but he called from behind me. Why the sudden concern? I narrowed my eyes on the ground before saying, if you would like to keep questioning my commands, I can easily arrange for you to no longer be under them. An audible gulp filled the air, and my lips tipped despite my trying to keep them neutral. I'll get her to the doctor right away, Alpha. I nodded. Good choice. Sarah. Consciousness came back in small doses, like waves lapping at the shore. I noticed small things as it came back. Like the shivers that were no longer making me tremble, or the hard concrete floor that had mysteriously turned into a cushion. The throbbing mess of my hand had vanished into nothing but a dull ache, and the bruises around my throat had almost stopped hurting completely. Everything felt better, but that didn't make any sense. I was in a cell, sure I was good as dead. I should have been dead by then. Right? Not right, because as more senses started to filter in, I noticed the very bright lights above my head, the white walls around my bed, not a floor, a bed. It wasn't a cell, it was a hospital, but that couldn't be true. The forbidden forest wasn't supposed to house livable qualities. It was meant to repulse people into never entering or even think about entering. The only things that could survive there are the toughest of animals. At least, that's what everyone was led to believe. A headache started to form, but when I went to rub my forehead, I found I couldn't. My eyes shot down lightning fast to my hands, where I found thick blue straps enveloping my wrists. And my ankles. And my waist. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Somehow, this was worse than a prison cell. I was completely vulnerable, helpless. I couldn't lift my hands, I couldn't use my legs, I couldn't move. Panic bubbled, simmered, and exploded inside of me until I was left gasping, fighting for control of something. Anything. Voices from outside had me tensing even more than I already was. Were they coming to finish the job? But why would I be in a hospital if they intended to kill me? Did they want my injuries healed before they made new ones? The door opened, and I was a spring that was ready to bounce to outer space. My nerves were so coiled and fried I was surprised my nervous system was still functioning at this point. Hello there, a man in a white coat greeted me as he walked in. I'm Dr. Lowe, but Arlo works just as well. What may I call you? I had watched enough detective dramas as a kid to know that giving up your name is basically like giving up everything you stand to hold back, so, no. Arlo was not deterred in the least by my silence and instead went to the machine I failed to notice beside my bed. A thin white cord protruded from my chest and up into the device, showcasing how utterly terrified I was to anyone who looked at it. I cringed as I looked away, but Arlo just chuckled. It's completely normal to be afraid. You don't know where you are or if you can trust anyone here. I understand. I only wish I knew how you got here, but I'm guessing that information is gonna be hard to come by, I looked down into my lap. Thought so, he said, moving to the cupboards on the back wall. I'm sorry about the restraints. Rowan can be quite the worrywart, and he insisted. He came back to my side holding a roll of ivory cloth. I'm going to take a look at your hand, alright? He did kinda look like a doctor, and the room wasn't much different from the ones I'd seen back home, so I slowly nodded. He unstrapped the blue material on my wrist before carefully lifting my hand to undo the wrapping I hadn't noticed was on. It looked red and swollen, but it hurt so much less than earlier. It's not broken, Arlo said as he started rewrapping my hand. But you do have a pretty bad sprain, so it'll stay wrapped and iced for a while, okay? I nodded again, watching as he stuck the wrapping in place and slipped my wrist back into the blue strap. Well, unless there's anything you'd like to talk to me about, I think I'm done here. I said nothing, and he sighed. Okay then. Those bruises on your throat should heal nicely on their own as long as you avoid touching them too much, he nodded, as if assuring himself he covered everything, then said, I'll be back later to check in. And then I was alone. Again. I opened my eyes for the 5th time as I huffed a frustrated sigh. I had thought I might be able to sleep again, but with panic hacking away at my brain and the pain that started to seep through my hand again, unconsciousness just wouldn't come. I didn't know what time it was or how many days I had been here, and it was freaking me out. This trip was supposed to be an in-and-out job with little to no casualties. None of this was supposed to happen. A click from the right had all my muscles tightened into iron as I turned my head. My breath clogged in my lungs, making it difficult to take air in. Dark brown curls crowned his head, long lashes framed eyes so green the first could just about see the forest within them, and just enough scruff on his jaw to make it noticeable. He looked attractive. So attractive that I forgot why I was scared. Something about him just seemed calming, maybe? I hear you're quite interested in a conversation with the alpha. His voice sounded like something an audiobook company should be aware of, and I had to keep myself from melting. Yes, I stuttered out. I still had no idea what an alpha was or why the word held such importance with these people. Well, you're looking at him, so speak, he practically snarled. The alpha was a man. Of course, he was. My not-so-brilliant plan unfolded in front of me like sand running through fingers, and I cringed at the lack of detail. I had nothing planned past staying alive. I cleared my throat, hoping to buy myself a second, but the man, alpha, raised his brows in clear impatience. I would like to. My brain scrambled for ideas, thoughts, anything that would form words in my head. The pressure on my ankles finally made me say, I would like to be set free. His jaw ticked, and fear flooded my stomach once again, dread tickling my spine. You were imprisoned far after you requested my attention. He walked closer to my bed, and something like mint and oak filled my nose before I shook it away. I don't like games, and I have no use for worthless humans who waste my time. His face came within inches of mine. Either you talk, or you find out the consequences for if you don't. Your choice. Goosebumps erupted everywhere as I tried desperately to keep the pressure behind my eyes to stay there. I am on a mission, I started, wondering how much information would be sufficient. I believe someone in these woods needs my help, and I intended to save them before I ran into some difficulties. His eyes narrowed before he asked, You entered the forbidden woods by yourself in search of a corpse? I glared as I said, He's not a corpse. He's alive. I know it. Silence ensued for one moment, then two, then. Hot air brushed my cheeks as a growl filled the silence. Ryan. I yanked my wolf back as I stepped away, but not before a chill-inducing growl left my mouth. The girl tensed even more as a quiet whimper escaped her throat, and her brown eyes widened to the point of almost falling out. My gut clenched in guilt, but if I had mastered anything in my days as alpha, it was how to mask and ignore any emotion that shouldn't be there. He, you say? I pushed away the jealousy, masking it as I had the guilt. Your partner? I spotted disgust on her face right before she neutralized her features again. A family member, then. Your brother? I asked, assessing her for any reaction. If I had to guess like this with anyone else, they'd probably be dead by now, but something about being there, in that room with her, it made me feel. I shook myself. I expected the emotion once I found my mate, the desire and joy I feel, but I didn't anticipate it being this strong or hard to ignore. Your father, then. My words were not kind, and as her swallow sounded, I knew I hit my mark. He's dead. Nobody survives in this forest longer than a night. You could be a little less heartless, my wolf growled. The girl's chest heaved harder as she glared. You don't know that, and your logic has flaws considering I'm sitting in front of you right now. She looked terrified, yet her chin jutted out and her eyes flared. She was stubborn, and I'd bet she would show me every single defense she had before backing down. I walked around to grip the end of the hospital bed, not trusting myself to keep my hands to myself when she looked at me like that. You mind telling me how that happened? I asked. Her stare turned irritated as she said, I was chased, I ran, a very tall man dragged me here, and the rest is in your hands. Plastic groaned beneath my fingers, and I pushed myself away, running frustrated hands through my hair. Humans shouldn't. I stopped as her earlier words hit my brain. Wait, how did you know that I was an alpha? Her breath caught, and my curiosity reached higher. Humans were sheltered to their side of the world while our lives were lived out on this side, and the forbidden forest separated them. I know the stories about how some of the elders tried to blend our worlds, but the humans were too fragile, their minds too light to carry such harsh truths. So they made the forest deadly, made it so that anyone who tried to pass through without a wolf would be attacked, and so that no human made it out to tell the tale. That's how it had worked for centuries, so how did this girl suddenly waltz through with a couple of scratches and a claim of knowing who I was? A tremor went through her, and the eyes that had held so much fire earlier now only held trepidation. My wolf whimpered, and I shoved my walls back up. Please don't kill me. She blurted. I promise I mean no harm, and I'll be out of your way as soon as I find my father. How did I convince her that the only way her father was alive was if he suddenly became a new species? Your father is dead, I started, but before I could speak again, her arms pulled on the restraints, her determination coming back in a giant wave. He isn't. She cried. I don't know how I know, but I just do. He left countless times, but he always came back to me. She thought for a minute before saying, the roses. He used to bring me a white rose every time he came back. White roses don't grow where I'm from. Someone told me they only grow here, in the Forbidden Forest. It's the only explanation for where he always goes. It's proof that. What is your father's name? I snarled. My blood started to boil the minute that damn white rose left her mouth. My anger was never in check when it came to that topic. I despised those flowers. They made me sick, and you want to know why? Because the rogue who killed my father felt the need to spread them around his corpse. The girl stayed silent, and I leaned forward, pronouncing every syllable as I asked, what is his name? Her shaking form cowered, and I distantly felt my wolf scratching, clawing, and howling at me to stop, but all I could process was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. Foxley R. Bennett, she whispered. The man I had been hunting for the last 7 months. Leader of the largest and most dangerous rogue army in the Forbidden Forest. The rogue who orchestrated my father's murder. And I had aided his daughter. His daughter was my mate. Disgust filled me, but I quickly tamped it down. Either she doesn't know a single thing about her father, or she's one hell of an actor. What is your name? My words came out calm and collected despite the war that raged within me. She swallowed, seeming to contemplate whether to tell me or not before she replied, Sarah. The word echoed in my head, sending desire rippling through my body, but I stuffed it in a box. I didn't have time for this. My jaw ticked, the muscles aching from how hard my teeth were clenched. I took a deep breath, trying to blow every single feeling out with the exhale. Okay, Sarah, here are your options. I saw the goosebumps that rained across her skin as I said her name, but I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall, feigning indifference as I said, you can stay here and help us find your father, or, I can have one of my men escort you back into the forest, where you will undoubtedly be dead within minutes. I would never actually do the latter, but let her think she has a choice. Wait. Her brows drew downward and I couldn't keep myself from following the motion with my eyes. Why would you help me? You just said that he's good as dead, and now you want to help me find him? Oh, I could guarantee that Foxley was still alive and well, planning his next attack on innocent wolves. Do you not want my help then? My words were harsh and straight to the point. I was not playing nice just because some fate demanded I had to. Her eyes grew wide and she said, no, I do. So, you'll help me look? I almost laughed. No, you are going to help me look. Ryan. So, let me get this straight, Rowan started. The most dangerous rogue in the forest. The rogue that we have been looking everywhere for. The rogue that gets away every time unscathed. His daughter just walked into our pack? I rubbed my temple to ease the oncoming ache. Yes, I said, irritated. We're leaving in a couple of hours. I'm not wasting a single second if that girl thinks she can find him. Kyler glared from his spot in the corner as he asked, what happens when you find him? What happens to the girl when you find him? Sometimes I envied the heart he had. One that was so big it barely fit inside his chest. But right then, when it was clouding his sense of judgment, I only wished he could deflate it a little. I will murder him as he murdered my father, and I won't think twice about it. He stared, eyes an unflinching shade of boiling blue. And the girl? A metal rod shoved itself down my spine as all of my muscles clenched one by one. Leaving her was probably one of the hardest things I had ever done, even knowing I would see her in less than an hour, it didn't make it better. The bond was brutal when refused, pushing and pulling at your heartstrings until nothing was left to pull. I needed to get it under control, needed to learn how to ignore it better because if I slipped up with everyone watching, she was dead. My gut shriveled, my heart begging with each beat not to say the words I was about to say, but I didn't have a choice. She'll go back to her side, with people who aren't murderers. I'm doing her a favor. Kyler's eyes suddenly turned skeptical, searching. He knew something, but before I couldn't ask what, Rowan announced, I'll go get a group together. I nodded. Link me when you're ready. The door closed after him, and the silence was almost too much. She's your mate, isn't she? My lungs restricted, air pushing and pushing until finally I coughed it up. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. You really are an asshole, you know that? He said incredulously. My molars ground, anger leaking in fast and heavy. At least I can tell the difference between a heart-led mistake and a mind-led decision, I shoot back. I didn't see him until he was right in front of me, my back pressed to the wall and his hands gripping my shirt collar. You call my feelings useless and deceitful, but at least I have some. He got closer, eyes boring into mine. The day you learn to feel something will be a day that you realize the world doesn't revolve around logic, it revolves around how people deal with that logic. I shoved him off, almost pulling us both to the ground in my haste to get away. I'm sending her back. I all but yelled. What more do you want? I don't have time for a mate, and I certainly don't have time for love. It's a lie, and by the look of his face, he knew it. He slumped onto the couch in my office, head in his hands. He looked worn out, and guilt washed through me. I did that. I turned into someone he couldn't rely on, couldn't talk to, couldn't rant to, and couldn't do anything but follow orders. He was my best friend, but somewhere along the lines, I started treating him like my beta. I sighed, rubbing my forehead. Confrontation wasn't my thing, but I guess there was a first time for everything. Look, Words came and went, each worse than the last, so I simply said, I haven't been fair. I've treated you like shit when all you've done is help me out. I'm sorry. I waited in silence. Waited a little more. A little more. More. I looked up, intending to pester him, but he was already looking at me with amusement. Did you just apologize to me? Oh my gosh, I muttered, glaring. Accept it or don't. I have things to do. He laughed, and I almost smiled when I finally heard actual joy in it. I'll accept your apology. I nodded, but then he added, on one condition. I rolled my eyes but gestured for him to continue. You give her a chance. I was shaking my head before he was even done speaking. If I put her in a place of importance, she is immediately on every rogue's radar. His head fell back against the couch as he stretched, patient and dubious. You don't know that. She's already the daughter of a rogue. He thought for a minute before saying, in fact, I'll bet that as soon as you kill her dad, targets will fill her back faster than she can blink. I paused. I hadn't even considered that. Kyler saw the hesitation in my features and said, she's already in here, Nolix, and if you send her back after everything she sees, she'll be dead within seconds. My full name had my attention snapping to his every word, exactly as he wanted. Don't call me that, I snapped. He just smirked. It gets your attention when nothing else will. You're thinking about it, aren't you? The information spun and spun, sending my set-out plans scattering across the floor. I will consider it, but that doesn't mean I'm accepting her. If anything, I'll find her a safer pack to stay in. He opened his mouth but I quickly added, don't push this. I'm glad you have Kia, but I don't need anyone. I'm perfectly happy on my own. Liar, my wolf said. Maybe I was, but I wouldn't love someone just to lose them. If I had to care from afar, then I would. As long as she stayed safe, everything would be fine. It doesn't fit, Sarah whispered. I dragged over another pair of boots and tapped her other foot. Try this one. I refused to let her wear her sorry excuse for boots and instead asked Kara to gather a couple of warm options for her. Most of them had been too big, but from the looks of this one, I think we had found a winner. How does it feel? I asked, staring at the boots, avoiding eye contact. I knew as soon as I looked into that warm brown gaze, I'd be a goner. You already are, my wolf said with a chuckle. I didn't bother denying him as Sarah twisted her foot, testing and feeling. They feel nice, she replied quietly, almost inaudibly. Since coming out of the room and off her restraints, she'd been very quiet. Only answered questions that were asked and tried to make herself as invisible as possible. It was frustrating, the way she wouldn't look or speak to me, but I had no right to feel that way considering I was doing the same thing. Damn mate Bond. I cleared my throat before saying, well then these are what you are wearing. Your jacket will do, but I'll get Kara to grab a new pair of mittens for you. I was suddenly consumed with worries that she would be too cold, get frostbite, develop hypothermia, succumb to pneumonia, become a victim of bronchitis, get. Thank you, Sarah said, breaking off my wild internal rant. I can assure you I won't abuse your time, and I intend to pay you back. She thought for a second before adding, somehow. Her words weren't hushed or whispered this time, and warmth traveled somewhere it definitely shouldn't when I was hit with her voice. That won't be necessary, I said. She opened her mouth to object, but then footsteps had her closing it. All ready to go? Kyler asked as he appeared through the archway of the porch. I didn't miss the slight flinch that jolts Sarah's body, but I ignored it as I replied with, I believe so. I glanced at her quickly, making sure her eyes were otherwise occupied before I mind-linked Kyler, I have a stop first. He gave me a strange look before asking, what? I couldn't help a smirk from blooming as I linked, Caden's pack. Ryan. Caden's pack was, as usual, bustling with activity and excitement. People walked and ran around us, kids screamed and laughed as they played games wherever they pleased, and vendors sold everything and anything as they shouted words of persuasion to passers-by. I could hardly move in the chaos. If we don't at least get some of AL's peppermint cookies out of this, I'll throw hands, Kyler muttered from beside me. When did you become such a crowd-wuss? I asked. Since I had nightmares about the last woman I encountered in one of these crowds, he grumbled with a shudder. Ah, are afraid another girl is going to touch your pride? Rowan crooned from behind us. Kyler scoffed. My ass is not my pride, and I am not afraid. Right, Rowan said, leaning in to whisper, only of girls. I am not. If you both don't shut up I'll make you sit back with Adrian until I'm done, I snapped. Silence ensued, and my lips twitched. I bet they would rather eat their fur than sit with that man for more than a second. Who's Adrian? Sarah's quiet voice rang out. With the mate bond echoing through my nerves with each past minute, I would be lying if I said I forgot she was with us, but I couldn't say the same for Kyler and Rowan, who jumped at her voice. He's one of the 3 most trusted guards Caden has on patrol, I explained. But he's also one of the most irritating. And rude, Rowan added. Don't forget completely self-centered and dickish, Kyler chimed in with a scowl. Talking about my best guard, I hear? Caden asked as he appeared through the crowd. Sarah jumped, and instinct had my hand coming to her back before I ripped it away, careful to avoid her eyes. Instead, I glanced up at Caden, who didn't seem to be avoiding her eyes at all. I swallowed the growl that forced itself up my throat as I gripped his hand. Good to see you, man. My words were calm, and collected despite the snarls that were ricocheting around in my head. He smiled as he returned my handshake and asked, to what do I owe the pleasure of this visit? I had only just realized how foolish it was to bring Sarah with us into Caden's pack. The entire reason we were there was to get weapons, and I couldn't exactly request them in front of her when we were supposed to be finding her father, not planning his murder. I should have left her with the soldiers at the border of Red Moon. I cleared my throat before saying, I need supplies. My eyes held his, trying to convey everything my mouth couldn't. He glanced at Sarah, and understanding dawned in his eyes as he turned back to me and nodded. I can discuss details with Rowan if you'd like. And I'll even help him load it all up for you. Kyler probably wants to stop in at Sprinkled, no doubt, and I'd never let somebody leave my pack without trying one of Valeria's peppermint cookies. He directed his words at Sarah, and a sad smile played on his lips. My heart twinged. His mate, Valeria, owned Sprinkled, and after months of trying to gain her affection, he finally gave up. He refused to sever the bond, and she refused to complete it. Nobody knew the real reason except them, but every time I got an inch within the subject, Caden took 10 back. It was a shame, because I knew both individuals quite well, and I was sure that they would make an amazing pair, but I guess fate lay within the hands of its master, not its peers. I would appreciate that, Caden, thank you, I said, smiling appreciatively. His smile flipped to happy within seconds. Precise, calculated, practiced. No problem at all, he replied. The scent of sugar, spice, and heat hit me as soon as the door to Sprinkled opened, and I inhaled, feeling no shame. Valeria was one of the greatest bakers alive, and I'd shamelessly smell anything she created. People enjoying all kinds of treats littered the outside patio and almost all the tables inside, leaving no space, as per usual. I swore this place was always stuffed. A clatter from behind the pastry display drew my attention, followed by a muttered shit. Still clumsy as ever, Al? I asked, trying not to laugh. Her head popped up, a massive smile blooming on her face. Ollie. She was a flash of movement before suddenly her arms were crushing my ribs. When did you guys get here? She didn't wait for a response. Instead, her eyes flit over to Kyler, moving on to crush his ribs as well before her gaze lands on Sarah, standing awkwardly in the corner. I had left her to cope with too much on her own, and I saw the confusion and a slight twinge of fear in her eyes. I'm Ilaria, Al said, moving to shake Sarah's hand. And you are? Sarah hesitantly returned the shake of her hand, saying, I'm Sarah. Ilaria beamed. Alright, Elle, what would you like to eat? If I wait to feed you till after the boys, there will be nothing left, so you better pick now. She started pointing at things as she said, I would personally recommend the cherry cupcakes, but everyone says my peppermint cookies are the best, and they're seasonal, so I'd grab one of those now if I were you, and I love the lemon tarts, which aren't seasonal, so it's okay if you want to wait on those. Oh, I also really recommend the raspberry crumble, though, the raspberry muffins are also super delicious, and nicknames are kinda her thing, I whispered to Sarah. My lips brushed the shell of her ear, and a shudder crawled through her, breath catching as her chest halted, then stuttered back to life. I smirked as I added, and babbling. She's incredibly passionate about baked goods, and if you let her, she would tell you about every one of those recipes, down to the dream she had that made it happen. Why Ollie? Isn't your name Ryan? She whispered back. He'd electrified every single nerve. My name on her lips was. I couldn't even put it into words. I internally slapped myself. My control could not slip in here. If Ilaria found out Sarah was my mate, the whole world would know within minutes. My full name is Nolix, but I prefer Ryan. Al said Ryan is boring, so she calls me Ollie, I explained. Her brows furrowed, and my brain dared to think it was cute. But damn it, it really was. Why not Nolix? I expected a shudder at the name, a cringe or twitch at least, but nothing happened. Interesting. My head fought for an answer I couldn't give her, and, thankfully, Ilaria had excellent timing. And the blueberry mousse, but I ran out of the scones that go with that about an hour ago. Everything else is fair game though. So, what will it be? Sarah's eyes were wide as she said, a peppermint cookie? Ilaria could rival the sun with how bright her features were right then. 2 peppermint cookies and a cherry cupcake coming right up. Sarah opened her mouth, no doubt to object, but Al was already behind the counter again, preparing a plate with sweets. And for you guys? She asked, gesturing at Kyler and I. 2 dozen peppermint cookies and a lemon tart, Kyler said. All to go please, I added. Her shoulders dropped, and my heart followed the action. Despite her bakery being incredibly busy all the time, I knew how lonely she got. She had nothing and nobody left. Kyler and I are sort of the older brothers she never had, and I knew how much our visiting her meant, but we could only do it so often. I'm sorry, Al. I really wish we could stay longer, but, unfortunately, this was just a pit stop, I said softly. She smiled, but I could see the force behind it. It's okay. I have orders to deliver this evening anyway. I'll see you later? I'm coming back as soon as these cookies are gone, Kyler said with a chuckle. Good, Ilaria said. We have a lot to catch up on, so you better be back soon, or I'm feeding you scraps from now on. I would expect nothing more, I said as we walked out. I got about 2 steps before I hit a body. 3 things immediately followed. A very menacing growl. Kyler shouting something I couldn't decipher. And Sarah's scream of terror. A wolf was creeping toward us, and he did not look happy. Sarah. There was a man standing right in front of us, and then. Well, then it was a wolf. It was a man, and then it was a wolf. But there was just a man there. It was a wolf now. A wolf was standing in front of me. In place of the man. It was a. Rough hands whirled my body around. Deep green eyes stared back at me, concern swirling through them, but that was the only thing I saw before I screwed my eyes shut. Breathing was becoming unbearably hard as each second passed, and I couldn't stop the stuttered pants that were leaving my lips. The world shifted, tipping and moving before it stopped again, but my head definitely didn't stop. It spun, and spun, and spun. Open your eyes, a soft voice commanded. Ryan's words were both soft and rough. Gentle yet stern. I promise you are safe. The wolf is gone. Just open your eyes. I shook my head as my breath became more and more shallow, bordering on nothing at all. Why not? He asked, so gentle. At odds with the gruff man I knew he was. It was a man, I whispered. But then it was a wolf. My head, something is wrong. Cool hands cupped my flushed cheeks, thumbs ran soothing circles up and down. Nothing is wrong, Sarah. I can explain everything to you, but I would rather talk to you, not your eyelids. What are you saying? I asked as I slowly opened my eyes. His green gaze hit me with force, and it shocked air back into my lungs, my chest expanding with my first full breath in minutes. My heart still thudded hard and fast against my ribs, but at least now I could breathe properly. I'm saying that what you saw wasn't a trick of your mind. He held my gaze as he added, it was real. A huff of laughter escaped me, but he didn't echo it. He looked very serious. What, exactly, are you saying? I asked him, trepidation clinging to my words. He took a deep breath, then explained, I'm saying that werewolves are real. I stood so fast my head started to spin again, light-headed spots crowding my vision. Stop it, I said, backing up a couple of steps. I knew that wolves existed in these woods, but werewolves? Monsters were supposed to live here, not mythical creatures with fangs. He stood too, slowly, like I was a crazed animal in need of caution. You don't have to believe me. You have your proof. Do with it what you will. He ran a hand through his hair before saying, I get that you may want time to process this, but I think we should get going. I blinked rapidly, the entire reason for this trip coming back into focus. Right, I said, my voice rough. I cleared my throat before adding, I can, process on the way. Let's go. He nodded. I'm here for any questions you have. I mirrored his movement. Thank you. Weapons. We needed weapons from Caden. And, if I wasn't mistaken, Ryan was hoping I wouldn't know about it. Kinda hard to hide them considering the only bags we carried were thin packs strapped to our backs. Plain sight was the only place for supplies to be. Why did you need weapons from Caden? Why not just bring your own? I asked. Ryan looked frustrated for a second before the emotion melted off his face, replaced with determination as he set about securing his pack back on his shoulders. Caden is the only person we know of that makes silverthorn, he said as he buckled the straps at his waist. It's a poison that coats metal, and it kills werewolves as soon as it enters their bloodstream. If we want any chance at surviving in this forest, then we're going to need some weapons that sway in our favor, don't you think? I swallowed, suddenly realizing what I had walked into. You are saving your father, I reminded myself. You two will go home and laugh about this someday. Right, I replied, but it came out wrong, breathless, and shaky. Get a hold of yourself. You are dead if your wits don't stay intact. Hey, Ryan started, grabbing my attention from the snow-covered ground. We're good, I promise. Nothing will happen to you, and if it does... Alpha. Rowan called. Ryan held my eyes a moment longer before jogging over to Rowan to converse with him and his men. They looked like an army ready to hunt prey, not a search party intending to find a victim. Something wet hit my nose, and I looked up to find white flakes raining from above. You know how to make a fire? I jumped, turning around to find Kyler smirking at me. Sorry, he said, hands up in mock surrender. I didn't mean to startle you. I forgot your hearing isn't as great as ours. I paused, eyeing him. What is that supposed to mean? He blinked, then panic flit through his gaze before disappearing completely. A small chuckle escaped his lips. I just mean living out here has made us listen to our surroundings. Become aware of everything that lurks out there, you know? And living in a forest has somehow enhanced your hearing? He shivered, but I saw the effort it took to force it. Chilly out here, isn't it? Let's go grab some wood. I looked back at Ryan, finding him in the same spot, still talking to Rowan, so I followed Kyler. The only sound was frost crinkling under our shoes, so I asked, when did people decide to start living in the forbidden forest? His steps faltered, but then he bent down to grab a loose twig. I think people have always lived in here, he started. It's safe when you know to survive in it. When you have houses and a giant fence, it's not so scary. A humming sound left my mouth as I picked up a stick. The wood was cold and damp in my hands. It would never start a fire. I can't believe a whole world lives just inside these trees, I said in wonder. Why don't more people know about it? He whipped around before snapping, because we like our privacy. I picked up another stick, cringing at the frost that coated it. Sorry. My dad and I will leave as soon as we find him, I promise. Silence ensued, but before I could look at his face, Kyler had already turned around, grabbing a handful of twigs. These aren't going to burn very well, he muttered with a sigh. I laughed quietly. You're just realizing that now? He shook his head, but I saw the tiny chuckle that shook his shoulders. Sarah. Ryan's voice rang through the trees, shaking fragile leaves with his roar. Sarah. Shit, Kyler muttered. What? I turned to him. Why is he so freaked out? I should have told him where we were going. He grabbed the sleeve of my coat and tugged. Come on. Ryan. We're over here. Kyler yelled. A shadow raced through the trees, not even discernible from how fast it was moving, but then suddenly, it was right in front of us. Ryan's eyes were black as night as he ripped Kyler away from me and pined him to the nearest tree. What the hell were you thinking? He snarled. Ryan. I think we should start with the south patch of the forest. That's usually where most rogues tend to camp, Rowan said. I nodded. That's where we will start then. I'll have a word with Sarah and see if she has any ideas. I looked to each of the soldiers to make sure we agreed, adding, we leave at dawn. Yes, Alpha, they all said in unison. I turned around, expecting to find Sarah standing where I left her, but she wasn't. Panic bubbled, but I tamped it down. She had to be there somewhere. She couldn't have just left. No, but she definitely could have been taken, my wolf said, his voice full of worry. Not helping, I snapped back. Sarah? I called as I walked around. Nothing. She wasn't there. That time, the panic reached higher, clawing at my collarbone. Sarah. I called, louder this time, anxiety coating my voice. My feet scrambled, going this way and that, searching, wanting, begging the universe to let her still be alive. Sarah. I called again as I trekked deeper through the woods. I could wake the whole forest with how loud I was yelling, but I had no care in my head right now. Nothing except Sarah's safety. Sarah. I shouted, my voice carrying through the bush. Ryan. Kyler's voice rang out. We're over here. My eyes finally reached a corner through the large trunks in front of me. Kyler was tugging Sarah behind him as he walked towards me. That bastard. My mind blanked, feet moving before my brain had time to process they even twitched, and then I was in front of him. I ripped him away from my mate, then threw his body backwards, shoving him up against the nearest tree as I growled, what the hell were you thinking? It was then that I realized my wolf had taken over, but I couldn't get control back, not when this much anger was pulsing through my blood. Kyler's hands went up, face turning away from my black stare as he explained, I wasn't hurting her, buddy, I swear. We were just grabbing some wood. My hands pushed harder, and Kyler grunted at the pressure. You lie. My wolf snarled. Suddenly hands were on my chest, pushing at it right before a head popped up in my vision. Stop it. Sarah demanded. Her features bragged of confidence, but I saw the rigid set of her spine, the small crease in her forehead, and the slight tremble of her fingers. I was scaring her. You're hurting him. He didn't do anything to me. And he is not lying. Look. She pointed to a pile of twigs and sticks as she spoke, and guilt slowly crept up my throat. Let him go, she whispered, eyes boring into mine. She no doubt saw the blackened gaze she held, but she didn't look away, didn't back down. Her hand slid up, fingers lightly brushing my exposed neck, and a shiver ran through me, my hold on Kyler slipping. Just let go, she murmured once more. My wolf finally relented, and I came back with a sigh, my hands wrenching themselves from Kyler's body. What was that? Sarah asked quietly. Her eyes, first bursting with confidence, now held nothing but trepidation, and so much confusion. I stuck my hands in the pockets of my jacket as I surveyed the tiny piles of twigs they had collected. That was called a temporary lapse in judgment, I started, turning away from her. Get used to it, sweetheart. You're an ass, my wolf grumbled. An ass that is protecting her from a monster. A monster that will have no problem coming out when we find her father? Who's going to protect her then? I guess you better stay locked up. We both know I'm not the monster you speak of. I ignored his last jab, instead turning to Kyler and asking, this is all the wood you gathered? He rubbed the back of his neck, a chuckle leaking from his lips. A chuckle. Like my near crushing him earlier didn't even matter. That should say something about your character. Shut it, I replied. Turns out that Snow and Loosewood are not friends. More like distant cousins, it seems. I rubbed a hand down my face, groaning. Why didn't we ask Caden for wood? I grumble. He chuckled again before answering, that sounds like something an alpha should have asked. Plus, who would have carried it? Right. I'll take these to our camp, Sarah started, picking up the measly stack of wood. You two figure out the rest. And then she was gone. She's pissed, Kyler noted, amusement threading his words. Why's that? I asked. He smirked, clearly getting a kick out of my ignorance. Because when Key is upset, she likes to pretend she isn't. That's when I know I did something that'll take a lot more than an apology. And if she ever says the words I'm fine? You better come up with something good to make it up to her. My brows furrow. What did I do? He rolled his eyes, an incredulous laugh leaving him. She isn't stupid, Ryan. She knows you're hiding something, and when she tried to get it out of you, you brushed her off. I opened my mouth to object, but he continued. I know you can't tell her, but give her something. She's trusting us blindfolded. Following our orders without question. Just give her something, Ryan. I'm not going to gain her trust just to rip it away when we find Foxley, I returned. He shook his head. Not her trust. Only her loyalty. Sparks of orange dotted the sky as we walked back to the camp, and I was amazed to see that Sarah managed to start a fire. Her laugh filled the air, followed by a chuckle from some of my men. Jealousy simmered below the surface of my blood, but I reminded myself that I didn't deserve her laughter, didn't want her laughter. She was here for one purpose, and anything else was unnecessary, including my building feelings for her. You won't deny her, my wolf growled, his claws scratching at my head. Watch me, I threw back at him, then I shut my walls up tight. I had blocked him out way too much in the last couple of days, and I knew it wouldn't last for much longer, but I would keep pushing it until it crumbled. I see you got a fire going, I observed as I sat on a log next to Sarah. Not too close, just in her general vicinity. She didn't even spare me a side eye as she said, I found some dry wood up in that tree over there. I made a humming sound, and then Kyler joined us, sitting on her other side. Beside her, not just in her general vicinity. I glared, and he smirked. That was smart, Kyler said as he bumped her shoulder. Looking in the trees should have been my first thought. I think I've discovered a lot of your first thoughts are not what they should be, Sarah replied as she poked at the fire. Snickers ensued from the other end of the fire before Rowan burst out laughing. I like this one, he said with a smug smile. I think we should keep her. I choked on air, and Kyler glanced over at me with a knowing smile. I cleared my throat before standing. I'm going to start putting up those tents. We have tents? Sarah asked, her brows furrowed slightly. Where are they? Rowan chuckled softly as he pulled his pack off. They're called compression tents. Very easy to travel with, and super lightweight, he explained as he pulled one out. I took it from him and started unfolding it, then I waited as the corners popped out, making a neat square, big enough for about 2 people comfortably. Kyler and I will share one, Sarah gets her own, and the rest of you can figure out the other 2, I said over my shoulder as I threw blankets into the tent. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. My muscles bunched as I realized she was talking to me. No problem. I went to walk away but she stepped in my path. Really, she started, hands wringing. You don't have to do any of this, yet here you are, making me a place to sleep for the night, she looked down before whispering, about earlier. I shook my head. I don't want to talk about earlier. No, I know, she cut in quickly. I was going to say that you don't have to. Your lives aren't any of my business, and it was rude of me to consider otherwise. I'm sorry. My mouth opened, then closed, words melting off my tongue faster than they could form. She nodded, then awkwardly slipped under my arm and into her tent. I rubbed my forehead, barely keeping a groan from slipping loose. How was I supposed to stay away from her when everything she did pushed me further forward? You don't, my wolf supplied helpfully. Shut it. Sarah. The fabric of the thin tent loomed above me, taunting me with the fact that my eyes wouldn't shut. I sat up, huffing a sigh. A wolf howled in the distance, and I shivered. The sound of danger always came out at night, and it was doing nothing to lull me to sleep. A crack sounded outside, and I jumped, my thoughts immediately thinking of ways to ward off a predator, but then I saw the faint glowing light of the fire still burning outside. I slipped on my boots, wrapped the thin blanket I was given around myself, and unzipped the tent, but it wasn't until I'd finished zipping it back up and turned around that I noticed I was not the only one out there. A shadow loomed by the flames, his head in his hands and his feet tapping a nervous rhythm in the snow. I was standing at least 10 steps away from the fire, and yet I knew who sat there, bathing in the orange light. I also knew that he was probably out here for solitude. I turned around to try again at the impossible task of sleep, but then he called out, "You can stay out here." I whipped around, but his figure hadn't moved. "If you want," he added. "I don't mind." Something about his voice had the cold whispering away, heat replacing it as I took slow steps to sit beside him. "You couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly as he glanced over at me. His eyes held mine for a minute before flitting away, but the feel of them stayed on my skin. It was strange, the effect he had on me. "I haven't grown accustomed to sleeping in the woods, I suppose," I murmured. "Not like you guys have." Silence stretched after that, and it was about to reach an awkward stage when he asked, "How's your wrist?" I blinked, then glanced down at the sprained wrist I had forgotten about until then. The thin white wrapping was dirty now, but it was still holding up relatively well. "Whatever that doctor gave me must have been very strong," I replied. "You have no idea," he muttered with a shake of his head. "I have more in my bag if you need it. Just let me know." Warmth spread through my chest, and I smiled to myself as I looked into the fire. "Do your parents live out here?" I didn't know what compelled me to ask the question, but I was suddenly overcome with curiosity. His foot tapping got faster, and his back straightened slightly, barely noticeable if one wasn't looking for it. If one wasn't searching for it. My question went unanswered, but I was not about to push him into something too painful to voice, so I sat there in silence with him. "My mother passed while giving birth to me," he started, voice thick. "She was very sick while she was pregnant, but none of the doctors believed her when she said it was more than morning sickness." He scoffed, his eyes, full of anger, stared into the fire. "They told her that pregnancy often made women delusional, that all she needed was a good night's rest. Giving birth to me was the last nail in her coffin." I was speechless. I had dealt with grief, loss, and the agony of not knowing if someone would come back to you, but I had never felt guilty over someone else's death, never felt responsible for one. It was palpable, the pain of responsibility he carried. The fault he felt was swirling in the air, drowning him, suffocating his soul. "How could you?" I stopped, unable to even believe he thought this of himself. "How could you blame yourself like that? How could you think I'm innocent?" he asked incredulously. My brows furrowed, pain throbbing through my heart at what a terrible burden he took upon himself. "You were barely a person. You had just been brought into the world. There's no way it could be your fault, Ryan." He shuddered, a feeling entering his eyes that I couldn't decipher. "I think you believe if you make yourself seem like a monster, then nobody will expect a hero," I said, moving closer to him so our eyes connected. "But your walls aren't iron, Nolix. I see you." His eyes swirled with something akin to desire, but that couldn't be right, right? But then he was tilting his head, inching closer, and I didn't stop myself from doing the same. Our lips, moments apart, electricity pulsing between them. So close, so. A scream reverberated through the air, and I was fairly certain it sounded like a male. "Rowan!" Kyler shouted, his voice shaky. "You can't do shit like that, man. You know how jumpy I am at night." Ryan chuckled, and I whipped my head back to him, my lips twitching at the sight of his smile. "Those two are always at it," he muttered. Then, standing, he said, "We should probably try to sleep. We have a lot of ground to cover tomorrow." I nodded, way too enthusiastically, as I answered, "Yes, yeah, we should do that." He nodded, and then I walked away, trying not to cringe at the fact that we had almost kissed. Trying not to cringe at the fact that I wanted to. Cold as my new nemesis. It had taken up room in my bones, filled my blood, and frosted up my insides. I didn't know when the temperature dropped to this degree, but I could tell you that it was not fun. "Almost there, guys!" Ryan shouted from the front of the line. The 100th shiver of the hour racked through me, and I almost groaned at the feeling of my toes slowly being sucked of sensation. None of the men were complaining, and it was either because they were really resilient, or incredibly prideful. It also could have been both. You doing alright there, Elle? Kyler asked. His use of Illyria's nickname for me didn't go unnoticed, so I replied with, I'm doing great, Lur. My voice was honey-sweet, amusement threading every word. Lur? He asked, incredulous. Why not Kai? I shook my head, a stupid grin on my face. I'm guessing that's what everybody calls you. I want mine to be unique, I said with a shrug. He scoffed, but I saw the twitching of his lips. Lur is not unique, it's weird. Like calling a deer an or something. I chuckled. When did deer come into the conversation? Since you decided that nicknames should no longer make sense, he answered with a laugh. It makes sense, I argued. It's just not what you're used to. I promise. We're here. Ryan's voice was all at once loud and quiet, the words he spoke forcing everyone into silence, too afraid to summon the dangers of the forest. The space around us simply looked like a wide expanse of trees and snow-packed earth, but I knew how deceiving those bushes could be. Split up into pairs of 2. Ryan shouted. Sarah, you're with me. Search this place from top to bottom. No corner left uncovered. Yes, Alpha. They all replied. I still hadn't figured out why they called him that, but as I followed Ryan through the forest, I decided it didn't matter. I was about to see my father again. We would go home, and I wouldn't have to sleep in my car anymore. I would have real company, instead of always talking to Bertha. I would have my dad back. Ryan. Her scent was driving me crazy. I think I finally had a handle on my wolf, then a breeze of dahlia-scented air surrounded me, and I was left scrambling to get him back under control. I paired with her to keep her safe, but my thoughts of everything I wanted to do to her right now were anything but safe. I almost kissed her last night. It had been a lapse in judgment, a slip-up, a mistake that wouldn't be happening again. I let my guard down, and it felt so natural with her. It felt natural to be myself around her. She asked a question, I answered. No lies, no pretenses, just a deep conversation between two people. I had never told anyone about the blame I felt, yet all it took was her soft question and adorable eyes to have me spilling my mind into her hands. Not only did I tell her my thoughts, but she made them feel less weighted. Like it might not have been my fault. Sarah shivered again behind me, bringing me out of my thoughts as her shaking vibrated in my ears, the sound of her teeth chattering gripping my heart in a hold so tight it hurt. She was freezing, but I was powerless to help her. Except, maybe. I stopped walking and turned, causing Sarah to halt as well. I unzipped my jacket and sweater, taking them both off. What are you doing? She asked, words chattering along with her teeth. Blue had started to tint her lips, and her nose was the color of roses in the summer. She was too damn cold. Helping you warm up, I answered, unzipping her gear as well. I'm fine, she said, trying to push my hands away. I shook my head with an incredulous laugh. Do me a favor and don't take a career that requires you to lie, okay? I pushed her arms through my sweater before putting her jacket back on, zipping it to her throat, tingles erupting from the contact of bare skin. I gritted my teeth as I wrapped her scarf back around her neck, ignoring the pull I felt to keep my hands there. She shuddered again, but I had an inkling that it wasn't because of the cold that time. I pulled her toque back over her ears and forehead before rubbing her covered arms, trying to give her body a head start at warming up. Her teeth were no longer chattering as she muttered, "Thank you. You didn't have to do that." Then she noticed my bare arms and panic filled her face. No, Ryan. I can't take your sweater. How will you stay warm? Her fingers rose to start undoing my handiwork, but I trapped them between mine. I still have my jacket, I reassured her. Plus, my body tends to run a little warmer than others. Abnormally warm is what I didn't add. Wolves had faster functions, and because of that, I was anything but cold right now. Well then put it back on. She demanded. Goodness, warmer or not, you'll freeze to death. My lips twitched as I put my jacket back on, fighting against the laughter that was bubbling up my throat. You're amused, but you won't be when you're sitting by a fire drinking scalding hot tea to ward off hypothermia. The laugh burst free, and it felt like the most uncontrolled thing I had ever done. It felt free. It felt good. She giggled too, but then her face turned soft as she murmured, I like your laugh. My eyebrows rose, a smirk dawning. Oh? Embarrassment coated her cheeks and she said, she huffed frustratedly before finally settling on, I just think it looks genuine. It looks like you don't show it often, so when you do, it lights up your whole face. She scrunched her features with a weak laugh. That is the most open thing I have ever said to anyone, and now that's it out of my mouth. I think it should have just stayed in my head because now that I heard it, it sounds kind of stupid and... I don't think it sounded stupid at all, I interrupted. Then moving closer I added, and you are one of the only people that can make me laugh like that, so it's only fair you noticed how rare it is. She grinned, but then something behind me caught her attention and her face lit up. Look. She pointed to something over my shoulder and I turned. A white rose. He has to be here somewhere. Alarms rang through my head, the echoes of a trick looming in the wind. I need you all at my location. Now. I demanded through my link with everyone. Coming now, Alpha, they all replied. I cautiously approached the spot that Sarah indicated, and every hair on my body zapped up as I saw what awaited us there. White roses outlined a very specific shape. A shape that I haven't seen in 7 months. My father was outlined in the very flowers he died within. That bastard, I gritted out. What? Sarah asks, alarmed. Is something wrong? He's not here, I said through clenched teeth. But he knows we are. Footsteps sounded, and then Kyler, Rowan, and 3 soldiers surrounded the flower-made man. Rowan whistled low. He sure does have a knack for pissing people off, doesn't he? Growling sounded from somewhere, and I whipped my head every which way, trying to find the source, but I couldn't see anything until suddenly, we were surrounded. No shifting, I commanded through the link. I refused to let Sarah find out about us because some rogues forced it on us. They started advancing closer, snapping their jaws as they frothed with unrestrained hunger. I gripped the silverthorn-tipped dagger that rested in the back of my pants before slowly opening Sarah's hand and setting it there. I know you don't know how to use this, but as soon as one of those wolves gets too close, you thrust blindly, with everything you have, you shove this dagger wherever you can. Got it? I didn't take my eyes off the beast stalking toward us, but I felt her panicked eyes staring up at me. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. Let me protect mate. My wolf demanded, his claws scratching at my skull, begging to be free. If you come out, we lose every ounce of trust we've gained so far. Rowan and Kyler drew their blades as the wolves got dangerously close, and the soldiers did the same. I drew my blade as I eyed a particular gray wolf, his eyes set on me, hatred burning in his gaze. I barely had time to blink before he pounced, his paws swiping for purchase but missing as I ducked left and arced my sword, catching his belly. He went down with a howl, my blade silencing his cry as I plunged it through his heart. I barely got a heartbeat in before 2 more were on me, their fangs snapping in warning. My blade went through the first's abdomen, but the second caught my forearm in its jaws. I grunted before swinging my sword to hit his head, his body falling limp at my feet. The next one didn't even get close enough to growl at me before I was shoving my blade into his back. Ryan! Sarah shouted, and I turned just in time to avoid a claw on my side. I swiped my sword left, but a piercing sting grabbed my calf in a death grip, dragging outward until I was knocked on my back, the air leaving my lungs in a giant whoosh. The silverthorn of my blade took effect in the first wolf, but I hadn't touched the one attached to my leg. Another jumped on me, his paws straddling my chest as he snarled in my face. This is why we work as a team. My wolf said angrily. Not the time, I gritted out. I went to raise my sword but a brown-furred wolf gripped it in his mouth. The one on my chest dipped his face closer to mine, his fangs lowering to my throat and... A cloud of fabric and brown hair bulldozed over my body, taking the wolf off my chest and the one biting my calf while simultaneously distracting the one holding my sword. I ripped it from his mouth and sliced across his legs, the silverthorn entering his blood making him drop on the spot. I jumped up, wincing as my leg protested, the healing taking longer than usual. I frantically searched for Sarah before finding her 6 steps to my right, her blade puncturing the throat of a golden-brown wolf. That's our mate, my wolf said proudly. Pride filled my chest, but it was quickly replaced by panic as a gray wolf pounced, his aim unmistakably Sarah. I bolted, but it was painfully clear who would reach her first, and I watched as the wolf jumped, hitting his mark and dragging Sarah to the ground. Ryan. I was blinded by panic, absolutely overwhelmed with fear as her body hit the ground. I was there a second later, my sword searing through the heart of the wolf who thought he could touch what was mine. His body fell off Sarah, and I wasted no time in flipping her over, my eyes moving at a rate even I couldn't comprehend as they thoroughly searched for injuries. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice demanding, needing to hear the words leave her mouth. Her dazed features didn't focus on my face, instead they were latched onto the dead wolf beside her. I lightly grasped her chin, guiding it until she met my eyes as I again asked, "Sarah, are you okay?" Her brown eyes disappeared in a blink, but then she was opening them back up as she muttered, "Yeah, I think so." "He touched her," my wolf growled. The promise of death lingered under his tone like he couldn't see the corpse lying not 2 feet away. "I know, but he already paid for it," I reassured him. A snarl vibrated through my skull as he said, "Not him. The one in the trees, hiding like a coward." My head whipped up, and I barely had time to see a smirking-faced rogue before he disappeared into the trees. Why wasn't he in his wolf form? And why would he bail? "Something is," Sarah whispers, her fingers gently touching the back of her head. "Something doesn't feel right." My hands cupped her neck, my brain searching and searching for things he could have done. "What is it?" I asked, looking at where her fingers rested. "Where does it hurt?" Her brows furrowed, eyelids drooping. "I don't know. It just hurts." Her last word came out slurred, and before I knew it, her body was slumping forward, her limbs giving up as everything slackened. I cursed low as I grabbed her face gently. Hey, Sarah," I said, tapping her cheek lightly. "Sarah, come on. Wake up." She was completely out, and I had no idea if what that lowlife did was fatal or not. "Kyler!" I yelled. He was at my side in an instant, his knees sinking beside mine, concerned eyes glancing over my mate. "I don't know what happened to her, but I'm not about to wait and find out if it's life or death. We were already attacked once. We need to go back and figure our stuff out." He nods, and I have never been more thankful for a beta that does first and asks questions later. "I'll gather everyone and make sure we make it back safely. There's no casualties as far as I'm aware." He gave me a look before saying, "Go take care of your mate." I nodded, and I hoped my face revealed just how grateful I was for him at that moment. "All right, buddy. Let's get our mate to safety." A second later the feeling of being pushed to the back of my head took hold, and I distantly watched as Kyler situated my mate upon my wolf's back before the world became a blur of green and brown. I hadn't stopped pacing in front of the hospital room door. The number 8 was branded into my skull from how many times I had looked at it, but my eyes couldn't seem to stop. The door shut not even 30 minutes ago, but it had felt like days since I handed her off, like time didn't make sense as long as that door was closed. As if my mental restlessness alerted him, the door finally creaked open, Arlo stepping out with a face so neutral I just about combusted with worry. "Well?" I asked, impatient. His mask cracked to reveal furrowed brows, and fear throbbed through my heart as I waited for him to speak. "I have done every examination of the head that I know how to do." He sighed, a hand coming up to rub at his face. "This is the first human I have ever had to deal with, so I may be missing something, but her head is completely fine from what I can tell." I scrubbed a hand across my jaw before saying, "He did something to her." "I know it. Maybe it wasn't her head?" "But that's where she said it hurts," I muttered, thinking for a moment. "What if he injected her with something?" His smile was weak as he answered, "I tested for every poison I know how to identify. She's completely healthy." "Do you have an estimated time on when she might wake up?" I asked. "Maybe she can tell us something." "I have no way to know for sure, but..." A scream cut through the air, the sound unmistakably Sarah. I moved without thinking, my feet bolting into the room she was in. Her hands were molded over her ears, fingers turning white from how hard she gripped the cartilage. The brown eyes I loved so much were screwed shut, making all her features look pinched. My body and mind seemed to be having trouble communicating today, because before I even knew I was moving, my body was sitting on the bed in front of her, my hands reaching up to lightly tug on her hands. "Sarah?" I asked softly. She whimpered, the sound tearing something in my heart. "Sweetheart," I whispered, leaning in to touch my forehead against hers. "Can you tell me what's wrong?" "It hurts," she choked out, a sob following. "I will rip that robe to shreds for hurting her," my wolf snarled, his anger quickly filling my head. My hands roamed, fingers finding her neck and moving upwards, around, down, up again, trying and failing to find something, anything, that could explain this. I moved to her head, my fingers gently prodding and searching, but there was nothing. I locked eyes with a grim-faced Arlo over Sarah's shoulder, my face pleading with him, begging for anything other than nothing, but he shook his head, eyes looking to the ground. Can you at least give her something for the pain? I asked through our link. He nodded, rushing toward a table in the back of the room and pulling a vial and a needle from one of the drawers. The pain will go away soon. I promise, I murmured. Her eyes opened, and the tears that glistened within made my gut clench. Are you okay? She asked, voice rough. An incredulous laugh escaped my mouth as I gently rubbed her cheeks. Here she was, in a hospital bed, fighting against pain she couldn't even understand, and yet she was asking if I was okay. You don't have to worry about me. I'm completely fine, I assured her. Her brows furrowed, either from the wince she suddenly made, or the words I said, I couldn't tell. But your leg, she said, her hands pushing harder into her head. The wolf, it bit your calf. Surprise flickered through me. I couldn't believe she remembered that. I had completely forgotten, seeing as it was already healed. My fingers gently brushed her wild curls behind her ears before I tugged her hands away from the reddened skin. I've been taken care of, I said softly as Arlo came up beside us. Now it's your turn. I have pain medication for you, Arlo said as he crouched down to eye level. Is it okay if I give it to you? Sarah nodded, a shudder rocking her spine at the movement. This should take care of the headache completely, he said as the needle pierced her arm. Her eyes drooped, and I caught her head before it fell back, lightly setting it on her pillow. That rogue did something to her, I said with measured calm. And I intend to find out exactly what. How? Arlo asked, skepticism seeping from his tone. Daggers rested beneath my words as said, I'm going to find him, and he's going to tell me how to fix this before I tear his body into ribbons. Ryan. I want Tristan to come with me, and any soldiers that he thinks are ready for real combat need to be geared up and ready to go, I said to Kyler as I repacked my bag with the necessary weapons. He and the rest of the soldiers had arrived shortly after Sarah fell asleep. No casualties, and as far as injuries went, they were all healed by now. Kyler nodded, again trusting me without question. I'll have them all ready to go in 20, he stated confidently. And I want you to stay here with Sarah, I added quickly as I ducked out of my room. Wait, what? His steps were fast to catch up to mine, his glare burning a brand into the side of my head. Why would I do that? He asked. Because I told you to. He scoffed. No way. You need me. You're right. I need you to stay here with Sarah. He opened his mouth, but I quickly said, the rogues could be planning to attack while I'm gone. They had to have known I would hunt them after what they did, and this could all be an elaborate plan to get me away. He took a deep breath, his jaw ticking once, twice, before he let out a giant sigh. Fine, but you better come back here in one piece. My lips twitched. Ah, Kai, are you worried about me? Shut up, he said, but I heard the humor in his voice. I will try my hardest to come back to you, Sudarbun, I cooed at him. He shoved my shoulder, and I laughed all the way out the door. Sarah. There was someone in my room. I knew because the window opening woke me up. The creak and slide of the glass floated around the room until my conscience decided it was time to come back. Shuffling began faintly at first, but then it got louder like it was right beside me. My eyes shot open, finding familiar brown ones staring back at me. Everything inside of me paused before rushing back in a giant force as I beheld my father before me. Hey there, kiddo, he greeted, a giant smile on his face. All of the air in my lungs left in a massive exhale, breathing becoming exponentially hard as stared at him, trying and failing to come to terms with the fact that my father was standing in front of me. Listen, I know this has got to be hard to grasp, but we don't have a lot of time, he said in a rush. He grabbed my boots from the floor and slipped them on my feet before grabbing my coat and gesturing for me to stand up. My brows furrowed, sense finally starting to return. What do you mean? Everyone here is going to be so happy when they find out you're here. I said, getting excited. Although I can't for the life of me figure out why they wanted to find you as bad as I did, but they did, and now we can finally stop searching and... Sarah, I know you're excited, but we have to leave now. I shook my head, a smile blooming on my lips. No, we don't. I promise it's safe here. They've all been searching for you, and we can't leave without telling them. His grip was gentle but rough all at once as he guided me off the bed and toward the window. I want to show you something first, then we can come back and do the cheerful reunion, okay? I gestured at the door as I said, okay, but why don't we try using the door first? I let out a small chuckle after my words, but he didn't look the least bit amused. The window is faster. Please, Sarah, just listen. Skepticism filled me as I slowly started to exit through the window. Something about him felt off. Different, but not in a good way. Luckily, the hospital was on the first floor, so I only had to drop about 4 feet before my boots met the snow. He dropped down soon after, handing me my coat which I hurriedly put on, desperate to ward off the chill. This way, he said, creeping around the building. Why are we sneaking around? I asked. Questions pelted my brain like hail, confusion making it hard to see straight. He turned around to gently grasp my shoulders, his eyes very serious as he said, I know you have a lot of questions, but I just need you to do what I say until we can get somewhere safe. I will explain everything to you. I promise. A spider of dread crawled up my spine, making every single one of my hairs stand on end. This wasn't right. Something about him was strange. More hard exterior where it used to be soft. I nodded nonetheless. He was still my dad, and he was the entire reason I came to this forest. Something in the back of my head whispered of something else I found in these trees. Something with forest green eyes and hair the color of melted chocolate. Something with a heart of gold but a face of steel. Something that made me feel things. Something that I could never have. So, ignoring the warnings that yelled at me to turn around, I followed him. He crept all the way around to the back of the giant building, then, looking both ways as if we were crossing a street, he started to walk towards the massive wall encasing this little town. It still awed me to this day how much existence lived here, but I didn't take the time to gaze at it as I trailed quietly behind my father. Hey! You there! Someone yelled from the arched entrance. As we got closer, I saw that it was one of the soldiers from our trip. Luke, I think I heard one of the guys call him. Sarah? He asked as we approached him. Luke, this is my father, he found. I was pulled back against a chest just as a hand slammed over my mouth, making all my words halt, trapped behind the prison of my lips. We were just leaving, my father said. His voice sounded odd, stilted, and edged. Rough and angry. I pushed and pulled at his hand but he was unrelenting, his fingers clenched tight on my cheek. I don't think so, Luke said, drawing up his weapon in warning. I shook my head, desperately trying to free my mouth so I could tell him my father meant no harm. At least, I didn't think he did. I encourage you to lower that weapon because the result won't be pretty, my father said through clenched teeth. I looked up at him to the best of my ability, but I instantly wished I hadn't. His eyes were no longer the warm brown ones I was used to, but cold, and black as midnight. His jaw was clenched, and anger seemed to seep from every hard line of his face. Let go of the girl, Luke warned. I will be taking my daughter with me, my father replied confidently. Let her go, Luke all but snarled. My father's head tilted before he clicked his tongue. Those weren't the words I wanted to hear. He said as he stepped forward, pushing me with him. You will halt this instant and remove your hands from the girl. My father laughed, and I cringed at the malicious sound. I wouldn't hold your breath. I craned my neck to see a smirk tilt his lips. Or do. Luke dropped to the ground, his hands clawing at his throat as his face turned an alarming shade of blue. I screamed, but the sound was muffled by the monster holding me. I did warn him, little flower. His ignorance is not my concern, he said without sympathy. Now, let's go home, shall we? Sarah. We were not leaving this forest. I knew because I had come in here the other way. We were only going deeper, but I didn't have the heart or voice to speak up and tell him. Everything he was to me shattered with a single action. He killed that man. I watched the color leach from Luke's face right before the life drained out of his eyes. I didn't know how he did it. He didn't even have to touch Luke before his life was forfeited. He didn't have to lift a single finger before Luke was choking on air that wouldn't come. I was walking behind a cold-blooded murderer. Snow crunched loud and obnoxious, the constant sound reverberating through my head until all I wanted to do was lie down in a quiet room and never come out. Never have to speak to the man in front of me again. Too many questions rang in my mind, but I had no idea how to even begin getting answers. I couldn't wait. My head was full of questions, snow crunching, and distressed. However, one thing it wasn't full of was pain. The ear-piercing, blind-inducing pain that sliced through my head only hours ago was completely gone, and I had a feeling my father showing up at the same time was not a coincidence. I stopped walking, planting my feet and crossing my arms before I demanded, "What did you do to me?" My voice was full of every bit of courage and confidence that I didn't have, but he didn't need to know that. He turned, his face full of confusion like I was the one who was playing games with him. "What do you mean?" he asked, and his tone so innocent, so him, that I had to remind myself of what he did only minutes ago. "Don't act dumb," I said. Something was wrong with my head. Coincidentally though, as soon as you showed up, my problem was gone. So, I'll ask again, what did you do? He sighed, and my shoulders dropped at the expression he wore. For all my persistence, I had wanted so badly for him to say it wasn't him. "I didn't do anything. One of my men put a tracking device in your neck. I had no idea it would cause so much pain, but I'm glad you're feeling better." I felt faint all of a sudden, my head too heavy, my heart too light as his words rang back and forth in my head. "One of my men. You mean the rogues?" It was a statement, not a question, but his nod only made my legs want to give out. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he said apologetically, stepping towards me. I had plans, preparations in order. We were going to. "Who are you?" I asked, my eyes burning. "Where's the dad who brought me roses after his business trips? The father who read stories when I couldn't sleep? The man who took care of his kid instead of abandoning her?" My voice broke, but I cleared my throat and kept going. "Why am I looking at a stranger who works with enemies? A stranger who murders innocent people? A man who puts tracking devices in his daughter because he's too lazy to just search for her? Where's my dad?" "I'm right here, little flower." He tried to grab my shoulders but I sidestepped, my body cringing away from his hands. "No," I said vehemently. "My father left the minute you decided to don this mask. I'm not coming back with you." The words hurt, the sting of everything I've ever known burning its way up my throat as I silently said goodbye to the only true thing I had left. My father shook his head, and dread filled me before he even opened his mouth. "I can't let you do that. I'm sorry." I took another step back, trepidation moving my feet before I did. "You won't even give me a choice?" His jaw ticked, his throat rolling with a swallow. "You don't know what that pack holds. It's safer with me, I promise." "Pack? Why does it feel like every time someone speaks more questions pile up? The people back there have done nothing but try to help me. In the hour since I've found you, you have killed an innocent man, admitted to hurting me, and taken away my freedom. How is that safer?" "That man made a choice," he growled. "Just as you are doing now. You aren't giving me one." I all but yelled. "Yes, I am. You either come with me willingly or you don't. Your choice." I shook my head slowly, my feet moving back step by step. "I choose neither." I was not athletic, but given the option between running for my life or facing a man who had quite possibly gone insane, I could become athletic. Racing through thick snow and dodging every tree that came in my path, I ran like my life depended on it, which, it quite literally could. Something caught me from behind, and I gawked at the speed he would have had to possess to catch me. I was already a few steps ahead before I started running, and I didn't hear him start until a little while after. I growled in frustration, my hands reaching back to hit anything I could find. I was being dramatic and childish, but I didn't care. I was scared, frustrated, cold, and all I wanted was to go back to Ryan. I couldn't tell you why, but I could tell you that I knew without a doubt that he was safer than the man currently pinning me beneath his body. "I'm sorry, little flower. I didn't want to have to do this, but you gave me no choice." I started to thrash, already knowing that his plans weren't going to be in my favor, but it didn't do anything to stop him. I felt the pierce of a needle in my neck right before my mind fogged to black. I used to love stories. The depictions of right and wrong, good and evil, hero and villain. It made sense. There was logic and there was foolishness. Reading books never had to be complicated or complex. There was always an ending. You knew that everything would work out in the end. The war would end, the guy would get his girl, and there would be a cute epilogue to show how happy everyone was. Life was not a book. Existing was not a fairy tale. Villains act like heroes, and heroes start to desire more than good. Logic and foolishness are often confused with each other, and everything you do seems complex. No matter how many ways you twisted it, life would always look the same. Uncertain, scary, and unpredictable. You could dip your toe in as shallow as you want, but nothing was stopping the wind from shoving you into the deep end. I had no idea a villain was living alongside me, and as I sat there in the dark, I couldn't think of a single hero who would come down here to rescue me. You are the spitting image of your mother. The voice made me jolt almost as much as the words. The words my father would say every time I missed my mom. He would tell me that if I just looked in the mirror, I wouldn't miss her anymore, because I would be looking right at her. Did you kill her too? I snapped. I didn't know what made me say the words, but the accusation didn't feel misplaced. I had never met my mother, because, according to Foxley, she had left around the same time she had me. I couldn't see his face, but I heard the sad sigh that came from him. I know you are distrustful of me right now, but I can tell you that I would never dare hurt anyone I cared about. Your mother was my best friend, and when I told you that she left, I wasn't lying. I scoffed, my tongue poking my cheek as I shook my head. Wouldn't hurt anyone you cared about? Is that why you drugged me and dumped my body in a dirty cell? Interesting way to show your love, but I guess we all have our flaws. I did this to protect you. He was suddenly in front of me, hands gripping the bars. My actions are only ever to protect you. Then why did you leave? I whispered. He rested his forehead on the iron bars before saying, word was spreading about my constant coming and going. I had to lay low for a few days so the packs would stay off my back. I knew you would eventually find me. I'm sorry you ended up in that horrible pack first. Confusion hadn't left my head since he found me, only stacked higher and higher. I had so many questions my head was beginning to pound with the heaviness of them all, but before I could ask a single one, shouting from upstairs sounded. Right before the clash of weapons. Ryan. If patience was a virtue, then impatience was an unconscious thought, because I was certain it was taking absolutely nothing out of me to crouch there in the grass and tap my foot. Except, well, my patience. Sitting on the edge of a rogue camp should have felt daring, dangerous, and exhilarating, but all I felt was irritation and anger. Angry that they jumped us and I didn't know until fangs were flashing. Angry that I let them hurt Sarah. Angry that most of them got away. Mickett says there's nothing so far, Tristan murmured from my left. Either they aren't here, or they're impossibly good at hiding. Mickett, one of Tristan's best trained soldiers, offered to scale the trees and listen for anything abnormal. He was an amazing tracker, and if he didn't sense anything, I believed there was nothing there. Give it another minute and then pack up, I ordered Tristan as I stood. I'm going to look around. He stood too, saying, Mickett can handle things here. I'm coming with you. I nodded, too tired and jittery to object. There was no harm in him coming. The abandoned building from afar looked like a rickety old pile of metal, but as we crept closer, I saw that it was more than scraps of metal. They had built their pack there. Little wooden sheds and makeshift houses created from anything and everything you could find in scrap piles littered the space around us. The giant hunk of metal I was assuming was the pack house was not half bad. It looked like a building, and that was saying something, trust me. They are just wolves with a point to prove, Tristan muttered, his hand brushing a red flag. Red was the rogue's signature color, and it was evident that this particular group did not care who knew what they were. Red littered everywhere. Paint on wood, flags on posts, paper stuck to the walls. It was almost admirable, how unashamedly they lived their lives. Thank you for humoring me, Tristan, but I don't think there's anything here, I said as I did one last turn. It was deserted. Crickets chirped somewhere in my head. The light breeze whistled in my ears. They left. To where I had no idea. I knew that Foxley was insanely good at evading people, and I knew his men were insanely good at covering up tracks. It was one of the reasons his life was still holding up. I didn't like playing hide and seek, and Foxley knew that. All right then, Tristan started, wiping his hands on his knees. We better get going if. Something white caught my eye, flying across the ground in a wild attempt at escaping the wind. A white rose. I looked to where it came from, my blood heating to a dangerous temperature as I saw more inside the building door. I walked over and propped it open, every nerve exploding in chaos as I read the message displayed in mangled white petals. You lose. I slammed the door shut, already knowing without a doubt what it meant. This man and his games. What? Tristan asked, rushing to catch up with me as I practically sprinted away from the door. What's wrong? He has Sarah, I growled right before my body shifted, muscles rearranging and skin tearing as I took on my wolf form. And then, I ran. Sarah. Let me out. I screamed at the bulky guard stalking in front of my cell. You can't keep me in here. The man rubbed his jaw, a smirk climbing on his lips. On the contrary, I think we can, considering we already are, he said with amusement. I gritted my teeth, my jaw working as I tapped my foot. Alright, Baldy, here's the deal. Mr. Boss Man up there? He thinks I'm his daughter, but he's insane. I'm not supposed to be here, so if you could just... Raucous laughter interrupted my words, and I glared at the bars. Nothing in this basement worked in my favor. You think lying will get you out of here? Alpha Foxley isn't insane, and you are his daughter. Now, he came right up to the bars, so close that his lunch wafted up my nose. Stop talking and sit still. That word again. What does alpha mean? I asked. His eyes turned skeptical. You don't know? I sighed, my fingers pinching the bridge of my nose. I was so done with this place. Would I be asking for information that was already residing in my head? His hands went up in mock surrender. So sorry, princess, no need to get snippy. I scowled at him, thinking my question would go unanswered, but then he said, it's a wolf thing. The alpha is the leader of the pack. There's always one werewolf more dominant than the others. In a rogue case, the alpha is usually group decided because ranks don't work on outlaws. We picked your dad. I almost gulped as my fear slowly crept back in. My dad is a werewolf? My hands started to shake, tremors that started and wouldn't stop. How did I not see the signs? Why didn't I connect the dots? Baldy laughs again before saying, is that not knowledge that was residing in your brain? Sorry to burst your bubble, princess, but looks like daddy isn't the teddy bear you thought he was. No, he wasn't. Nothing about my life was what it once was. So many shocks have been thrown at me that by now it's not so much shock as a gentle pulse. I dropped to the floor, my fingers starting a gentle pressure pattern on my head. It didn't help the growing ache, but it did give me something to do. Those boys just don't know when to stop fighting. I swear it's like they're little kids again every time an inconvenience occurs, my father's voice said as footsteps sounded on the stairs. The steps stopped in front of my cell, a big sigh bursting from my father's lips. What is it now, little flower? Did Quint do something? Hey! Quint objected, the slightest bit of panic in his voice. This door has not been unlocked since you went to deal with the hooligans upstairs. Silence stretched, pulling on space that was no longer there until finally, it snapped. You are a monster, I whispered, a single tear trickling the length of my cheek. What is she talking about? My father demanded angrily, presumably at Quint. Quint cleared his throat before saying, she asked what an alpha was. One thing led to another, and now she knows you're a werewolf. She what? My father asked, his voice dangerously low. I wasn't gonna lie to her. She was bound to find out sooner or later. I just made. His words ended with a choke, and my head snapped up so fast it spun, the room tilting before righting itself and displaying my father. The murderer. Dad, no. I shouted, helpless as I watched the same scene from earlier take place. Please, stop. I asked. It's my fault. He didn't do anything I didn't want. Please. His gaze locked on mine, my heart skipping when I noticed his eyes were black, but still, I stared, my glare unflinching. Please, I begged. Please don't kill him. The black stuttered, swirling and rolling until brown finally resurfaced, and oxygen reappeared in the room. Quint gagged, falling to his knees, coughing and shaking from head to toe, his shoulders vibrating with the force of his hard breaths. I was only reminding him not to leave out key details, my father drawled, casually, as if he didn't just try to kill the man on the floor. I took a deep breath, adrenaline still trying to settle. What details did he leave out? Your ability, perhaps? Don't worry, I'm well aware of it, I snapped. He smiled, the malice in it making my heart cringe. No, not my ability. That boy you seem to favor. I just thought you should know him and I share much the same qualities. My eyes flit between his, trying and failing to read through the cracks before I asked, what are you talking about? His smirk was so smug it took up all his features as he said, "What my dear Quint forgot to mention, is that Nolix is also a werewolf." Sarah. I stared at my father, my brain mulling over the words so many times that the letters no longer lined up. "What?" I asked, my brow scrunching. He chuckled. "Little flower." Shaking his head, he continues, "You always did trust too easily, you know that? You would talk to anyone and everyone wherever we went, uncaring that they were strangers. You started conversations with whoever would listen." A light smile bloomed as he donned a faraway look, but then his eyes were back on me, sharp and precise. "I suppose old habits really do die hard." I rubbed my temple, irritated with him, frustrated with myself, angry at the situation, terrified at what my life had fallen apart to. Too many riddles, too many puzzle pieces belonging to too many different puzzles and too many shapes that didn't fit in their molds. It was just too much of everything. "Would you stop speaking in riddles?" I almost begged. "What are you saying?" I knew what he was saying, but somehow I had convinced myself that maybe if I heard the words again, they would be different. Maybe if he uttered the letters in a different pattern, then I wouldn't have to believe that Ryan lied to me. Quint coughed again from his spot on the floor, and my father threw a disdainful look down at him before turning back to me and saying, "Nolix is a werewolf, just like me. He can shift, just like I can, and he can turn into a wolf, just as I do." Right, so I had heard correctly. "You're lying." I meant for the words to sound confident, strong-willed and sure, but they wilted, coming out in a whisper that broke in the air. He smiled sadly at me, the first show of affection he had given since coming down here. "For your sake, Sarah, I wish I was," he said sympathetically. Another thought occurred, words leaving my mouth before the thought even had time to process. "You didn't tell her either," I muttered, staring up at him in shock. "You didn't tell Mother what you were, and that's why she left, isn't it?" His jaw worked, eyes fading to midnight before rushing back to brown. "That is a very brave assumption," he said with a clenched jaw. I stood, walking up to the bars and gripping them with every ounce of anger I could muster. "It's not an assumption, it's a fact. You lied to her. Just like you lied to me. All you've done is—" "I was only trying to protect her." He exploded. "The Forbidden Forest is not made for the weak-minded. It was not created with human sensitivity in mind. It is dangerous, and I was only trying to keep her safe." "Trying to keep you safe?" I glared, my eyes so hard I was sure they could cut through glass. "You were only protecting yourself. You fear rejection so much that you would rather watch the people around you fall into your traps of lies." His eyes turned black, this time staying that color, and Quint muttered a soft swear from his spot on the floor. "You are so selfish that you would rather make someone love a mirage than explain to them what lies behind the illusion." His nails grew, sharpening and shining with a knife-like pierce. "Sarah," Quint murmured. "I think you should stop. I can't believe how many times I ate the bullshit that came out of your mouth about business trips and work vacations. How many times Mom ate it too before she got so fed up she left." "Sarah," Quint snapped. "Stop it." "Well, guess what? I'm fed up too, and if I wasn't trapped behind these damn bars I would be walking out that door, getting as far away from you as I could. Just like her." A tornado of pitch black filled the space between us, and then it was no longer my father standing there, but a snarling black wolf. I screamed, adrenaline rushing back up from the surface, barely gone from the last time. "Shit," Quint cursed, standing up slowly. The black wolf snapped its teeth, fangs dripping with saliva, starving for human flesh. "For me. You just had to provoke him, didn't you?" Quint muttered, shaking his head as he crept closer. The wolf's mouth latched onto a bar, and I watched in horror as he ripped it from the wall in one swift motion. I gulped audibly, my feet scrambling to carry my body as far back as I could get, as far away from the monster as possible. He ripped another, then another, peeling away my protection until his body was prowling towards me, low growls permeating the air with warnings. His body, now close enough to feel the rough fur of his coat, was massive. His head touched at least 5 feet above my own, and his knees were level with my stomach. "Please," I whimpered. "Please don't eat me." His head reached down, nudging my leg as wet, sticky spit dripped onto my boots. His fangs grazed my clothes, and a squeak escaped my mouth before I slammed my hands up over it. His jaw opened, a gut-wrenching snarl filling the silence before his head lowered to my neck, teeth glinting, ready to destroy. I closed my eyes, resignation blooming in my chest as I waited for the sharp pain. And waited. And wait. A giant thump filled the silence. I snapped my eyes open, only to see Quint standing over an unconscious black wolf, a tranquilizer gun in his hand. A massive exhale left my chest, air finally traveling through my lungs again as I asked, "Why would you do that?" He sighed, rugged blonde hair falling into his eyes before he brushed it back. "I don't like owing favors," he said. "You saved my life, and I saved yours. We're even." He gestured at the torn cage. "I didn't do that part, but I will look the other way if you decide you want to use the opportunity to escape. There's a door in the back that leads to a tunnel. It shoots out right into the middle of the forest. I don't know how long you'll survive out there, but it will be longer than if you stay in here." He turned around, doing good on his word, but I didn't move, instead asking, "Why do you stay with him? Why not find a different pack?" He laughed quietly, but it was sad. "Once you're rogue, life is not a pick-and-choose kind of situation. Rogue packs aren't sympathetic, and they don't like newcomers, especially from other outside packs." He shrugged, adding, "Plus, Foxley isn't such a terrible ruler when he wants to be one. It's his wolf that has no control." "Won't he kill you when he wakes up?" Quint twirled the gun in his hand before saying, he gave each of his closest in command one of these, knowing that when his wolf came out, unlike other werewolves, Foxley isn't aware nor in control of what he does in his altered form. "Once I explain, I'm hoping his anger will abate to relief." "And if it doesn't?" I asked in a whisper. He smiled sadly at me. "You don't have to worry about that. Get out of here, Sarah, and pray you never come back." He walked out of the cell, waiting until I was all the way out before smiling one last time at me and walking up the stairs. I cast a last glance at my once father, asleep in the pose of a bloodthirsty creature. Black as midnight and terrifying as death, but still as the walls that surrounded him. He looked peaceful, and that was the image I chose to keep instead of his fangs as they lunged at my neck. I chose to let the sleeping wolf stay in my head as I walked through the basement to find the tunnel door, and then I walked towards my freedom. Ryan. I had searched every known and unknown rogue location that anybody could think of, and I still had nothing. I was panic-driven, fear riding, and anxiety running. I was a mess, my wolf was a mess, everything was a mess. All because Sarah wasn't safe. I couldn't think straight, couldn't think of anything at all besides the fact that I didn't know where she was and that she was likely in danger. I had been looking almost all day, but it was like she vanished off the face of the earth. I halted, my brain turning, rolling with the possibilities I had just set in place. Off the face of the earth, or the face of the forest? Did he take her to the human side? My wolf asked. I clenched my jaw as I replied, only one way to find out. Meet me at the edge of the forest, and bring Tristan, I mind-linked Kyler. Nobody could search with me given my panic-hewn races across the forest, so I was alone in this discovery. If Foxley took her to the human side, then to the human side we would go. Sarah. He had brought me back to the other side. The normal side. Or some say the safer side. It was not safer, not in the chill dark as the sun said its final goodbyes. Not in the snow and cold when all I had was a light jacket and boots that were already soaked from that wolf's spit. It was a mess of search and survival. Something icy hit my nose, and I swiped it away before another one hit my cheek, and then my eyelash, and then my lip. I glanced up, almost growling at the earth's humor. Of course, it would be snowing when it was already cold outside. My toes started to tingle, and I wiggled them as much as I could, but eventually, they went numb, and I was left with wobbling feet that stumbled through the dark. My fingers ached in my pockets, already succumbing to the early stages of frostbite, and I clenched them into fists as I walked faster. I think I knew where I was going. The old man's cabin resided about 5 minutes to my left, so, if I was correct, that would mean if I kept walking straight, I would hit the edge of the forest in 16-ish minutes give or take. It was not that long. I could last 16 minutes, and then I would find a pack. Any pack besides a rogue one would be good, and I could warm up in their house while I sorted my head out. Everything was going to be fine. It would be. I knew it would. A giant gust of wind slammed into my side, my body so rigid with cold that I stumbled into the snow, my hands reaching out to catch my fall and landing in the plush white clouds. Or fabric. It could have been fabric. But it felt more like cotton balls or marshmallows. Soft white marshmallows that you could just lie your head in and... Sarah. I thought I might have forgotten what my name was. Is my brain trying to remind me? L. I could sleep forever to the sound of that voice. Rich and deep and oh so beautiful. Like the melody of a song you played for hours. The human side is massive, Alpha. She could be anywhere from here to in a different state by now. We're not leaving until we find her. Just keep looking. There was that voice again. And, maybe footsteps? That couldn't be right. I was sleeping, not walking. Sarah. I jolted. The voice, it was right there. A little fuzzy, but right there. Ryan? I intended to yell, but my voice came out scratchy and quiet. Was that her? It was, I swear it was. Sarah. I tried to clear my throat before saying again, Ryan. It was louder, and before I knew what was happening, a body landed next to mine, arms engulfing my body in warmth. Ryan. Being on the human side was weird, to say the least. It felt normal but not. The air was different somehow. Calmer. It didn't make any sense that a couple of trees could separate worlds, but here we were, standing in the proof. Can you get air sickness? Kyler asked, rubbing his arms. Because something does not feel right. Rowan chuckled before saying, stop being such a baby. I am not being a baby. My arms feel all tingly and shit. It's weird. We're not meant for this side, I muttered as I looked around. It's normal for the atmosphere to feel strange. I think the atmosphere loves me, Rowan stated proudly, and I heard the distinct sound of a body thumping to the ground, laughing following the sound. I shook my head. You guys are truly children sometimes, I said with a sigh. Kyler threw his hands up. My inner child won't leave. Kia thinks it's cute though, so I'm not working too hard to erase it. The reminder of his mate, safe at home and waiting for him to return to her, made my heart twist, gut clenching in a way I had never experienced. Sarah is my mate, I blurted, unable to deny it anymore, and, honestly, not sure I wanted to. I kept it a secret purely to keep her safe, but the situation we were in right then was evidence that danger would come no matter what titles I revealed. You know, Rowan started, crossing his arms. I knew something was off. Nothing gets you this riled, especially not a human you've just met. He smiled. Congratulations, man. I could pretend that I didn't know, but I like to think my pep talks in the dark helped you make a move, Kyler said, practically glowing with pride. I shoved him into the snow. A twig snapped to my left, and I whipped my head around, eyes scanning and searching. Sarah. I called. Kyler walked further up before shouting, L. The human side is massive, Alpha. She could be anywhere from here to in a different state by now, Rowan said. I shook my head, desperation clawing at my throat as I walked further up. We're not leaving until we find her. Just keep looking, I commanded. I kept walking, my feet carried by a need that I knew came from my wolf. Sarah. I called again, hands cupped around my mouth. It was useless to yell, I knew. She was probably holed up in a basement somewhere, cold and alone and... My wolf growled a low warning, and I stopped my mental track from going any farther. Ryan? The voice sent electricity zipping down my spine. I knew that voice. Was that her? Rowan asked. It was, I swear it was, Kyler said excitedly. Sarah. I shouted, my feet moving with a destination now. My eyes didn't stop looking, investigating every inch of snow. A large lump. It could be snow. Or it could be a person. Ryan? It croaked, and my body lurched, relief hitting me so hard that I almost gasped. My arms finally made purchase with her body, and it felt like coming home. It felt like holding my home. Is it really you? Sarah asked, voice rough with cold and shivers. I lifted her out of the snow, her figure fitting perfectly in my arms, before saying, it's really me, sweetheart. Her face nestled into my neck, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Her hand slid around my neck, and I had to keep myself from jolting at the ice-cold feeling of him. I missed you, she murmured. My grin was so big I was surprised my cheeks weren't aching as I said, I missed you too, Sarah. Let's get you home and warm, okay? Her lips tilted as her eyes closed. Okay. Sarah. I didn't remember my car being this comfortable. Or this warm. Or this squishy. Maybe I was delirious, the screw off living on my own for this long finally shoving me under. I didn't mind though, not one bit. I didn't want to get up. It felt like nothing I had ever experienced. Surrounded by the smell of warm mint tea in the morning paired with the gentle breeze from outside. I snuggled deeper into the... That was not a seat cushion. I was pretty certain it was a chest. A male chest, to be precise. I was lying on a male's chest. Everything came back to me in a rush of information, and my eyes shot open, horror seeping into every crevice of my bones as I realized my cheek was pressed against a human being right now. I bolted upright, limbs flailing, feet tangling, arms grasping and everything almost falling off the bed before I finally got myself in a sitting position. I didn't know what I expected to see when I looked up, but it was not Ryan casually lying there. Smirking at me. "Morning, gorgeous," he drawled, voice deep and rich and warm and soft and... What is wrong with me right now? I go to run a hand through my hair, expecting to see the white little wrapping on my sprained wrist, but not expecting to see tight-knit cloth covering all my fingers. And upon further inspection, I saw that my clothes were not what I was wearing yesterday. Did he? No. He wouldn't have, right? I looked to Ryan, intending to put on a stern face and have it out with him, but when I found his deep green eyes staring patiently at me, my anger melted off my skin like butter left in the microwave for too long. His brown curls were all flopped to one side of his head in a disheveled look that I couldn't say looked bad, and the black tank top he was wearing showed off muscles that I was sure every bodybuilder ever dreamed of. He was, in simple words, insanely hot, and I thought maybe I hadn't taken enough time to notice that. Had I actually just thought that? "Oh my goodness," I murmured, scrambling off the bed and going to stand somewhere far, far away from him. This was not normal. There was attractive, and then there was, well, that. It was unfair. My eyes and brain couldn't comprehend the man in front of me. His body was sculpted, fake, plastic. There was no way he was actually that hot. I cleared my throat, but it did nothing to calm the ovaries down there who were deciding to riot. "I need you to explain," I gestured at the bed, my hands, my clothes, his body. "Everything," as I said, "all of this." He chuckled, and I swore the sound went right down to my toes, heat curling in my stomach and staying there. "Oh boy. Well, last night we found you in the snow on the edge of the human border. Do you remember that?" My brain threw bits and pieces at me, and I scrambled to put them together as I said, "I remember falling in the snow, and I think someone was calling my name. But everything after that is pretty hazy." He nodded, moving to sit on the edge of the bed with his elbows propped on his knees. "We brought you back here after finding you. You had some mild frostbite on your fingers, hence the bandages, but other than that, you were okay. After getting bandaged and checked over by Arlo, I brought you up here and Kara changed your clothes and got you settled. And that leads to now." My eyes squinted, skepticism raging a battle in my gaze. "And at what point in that story did I end up on top of you?" I asked. He rubbed his jaw to cover a smile that I saw before saying, "You insisted my body was the only way you would stay warm." Red exploded in my cheeks, down my neck, up my forehead. Embarrassment coloring me head to toe. "I did no such thing," I said stubbornly. He smirked. "Oh yes, you did. And when I tried to sleep on the floor, you wouldn't let go of my neck." He rubbed the back of his neck as if remembering the scene as he added, "I can still feel your grip." I didn't know someone could hold on so tightly, even half asleep. "You have no proof," I said, crossing my arms. His smile was so smug when he asked, "Would you like me to go get Kara to recount the night more vividly for you?" I rubbed my hands up and down my face as I ashamedly mumbled, "I'm so sorry." "I'm not," he replied smoothly. "It was the best sleep I've ever had." My eyes peeked at him through my fingers, finding a warm smile and sincere green eyes. I dropped my hands to my sides before whispering, "Me too." Heat flared in his gaze, something like desire rolling in his irises before it disappeared. Interesting. Was it possible that the abnormal amount of attraction I felt toward him was not one-sided? Now that I was watching, it was hard to miss the way his eyes trailed lazily along my body, gaze turning heated once more before he shook his head and stood. "You need to eat, and if Marlene isn't already on her way up here to shove food down our throats, then I bet she's planning on it," Ryan said before gesturing at my clothes and adding, "If you want to change into something else, I can get you something, but if not, nobody will care if you stay in that." I looked down at the light pink cotton pants paired with the white t-shirt. No bra, but you couldn't super tell, and it was not like I planned on doing jumping jacks. It was just breakfast. I think I'm okay with this, I told him, smiling slightly. It felt weird, being here with him after everything. Being so casual after all I had learned. These people could turn into wolves, and yet, I felt safer here than I had in a long time. Feeling safe didn't change the fact that Ryan lied to me, though. I didn't know how exactly to bring it up in conversation. I was secretly hoping that my father was lying, that he wanted my distrust of someone else, but another part of me knew it made sense that Ryan would be a wolf, and I hated that I couldn't decide which route to go down. I knew that I needed to talk to him. There was so much oil in the water that I couldn't even pick out what was clean anymore, but right now, at that moment, all I wanted was to pretend nothing was new. To pretend that my life was perfectly fine and I was going to eat breakfast with the people I had known my whole life. Pretending was easier, and so, that was what I was doing right then. Ryan opened the door for me, and I walked into a hallway that looked never-ending. Did he have an entire floor to himself? There were 2 more doors, but they were far, far down the lavish hall. I turned to look at him before asking, "Is this whole floor just for you?" He smirked. Being the alpha certainly has its perks. My stomach dropped. Quint's explanation of what an alpha was coming to my brain in an unhelpful supply of certainty. He was definitely a wolf. He was a wolf in charge of a bunch of wolves. His smile dropped, concern rushing to take its place as he asked, "What happened?" I forced a light smile back on my face as I said, "Nothing. Just hungry, is all." His face turned skeptical, eyes narrowing on me knowingly. "You don't have to lie to me, Sarah. I will always be here to listen to you." Something about the way he said my name, and the sincerity lacing his words, made me think it was true. But I was not ready to have this conversation. I was still pretending, so I mustered up a bigger smile. "I just want to eat. If that's okay with you?" He looked disappointed for a second before wiping it off his face and nodding. "Of course." And so we walked our way through the hall and down the stairs. On my way to pretend. Just for today. Ryan. I figured I should probably stop staring at her at some point, but every time I tried, my eyes whipped right back, like magnets on a fridge. I couldn't help it. Her little brown curls that rested along her shoulders, some rogue strands fluttering on her collarbone. Her little nose that scrunched now and then with nerves. Her eyebrows that twitched downward every few seconds. The white t-shirt that left entirely too much to the imagination, the tight, pink cotton pants that begged my eyes to drift south. Brown swirls of curiosity that seemed to twinkle in the light and they were looking right at me. I cleared my throat, cheeks heating slightly as I shifted my gaze to the plate in front of me. I shouldn't be embarrassed. She was my mate, but until I found a good time to reveal that little tidbit, I couldn't look like a complete creep staring at her. "Have you forgotten the way her eyes mapped out our entire body in the bedroom earlier?" My wolf asked, voice full of a heat that grabbed my desire right back out of its hiding place. I had almost cleared my head of it until you so helpfully reminded me, I gritted out. "I'm so happy to be of service. If I have to live with the feel of her body and eyes on us playing a repetitive circle in my head, then so do you." I shifted, trying to ease the growing warmth traveling somewhere I didn't want it right now. "You are such an ass sometimes, you know?" I asked, irritated. "My reputation is very fragile. I have to keep it up at all times, lest you think I've forgiven you for shoving me in the recesses of your horrific mind," my wolf said with a shudder. "Why do you all do that?" Sarah asked, startling me back to the breakfast table. I swallowed, shifted again, and fiddled with my hands all to get her body out of my head. "Would you rather I project a different image?" My wolf asked. "Perhaps naked would be better or..." I slammed my walls up with a single, forceful shove. "Do what?" I asked Sarah, my voice a little too tight. She gestured at her eyes as she said, "Your eyes go all blurry. Almost like a mist is drawn over them." Oh shit. There was no explanation besides the one where I told her I was a wolf. I was not ready for this. This time with her feels precious, withering with every minute that passed, and I want to soak up every second that she gave me. I didn't want to spend the little time I had left with her being scared of me. I rubbed the back of my neck, mind scrambling and words desperately trying to form on my tongue but leaving before I could spit them out. I started but was interrupted. "I don't have time for this nonsense," came a loud voice from behind the swinging door that led to the kitchen. Don't you know the Luna is in that room, waiting for food that you are incapable of making? I can't give my future leader a burnt pancake with even more burnt bacon. You fix it, or I fix another person to your position. You understand? I knew I would regret telling my head cook about Sarah being my mate, but when she got suspicious of my keeping a human girl around, I had to give her something. Plus, after I told Kara, my head maid, she was bound to spill it to Marlene sometime. Those two gossip more than two old ladies out to tea after 5 years apart. Stuttered mumbles on the other side came from a frightened-sounding boy, and then Marlene was walking through the door, a bright pink apron tied around her waist and red hair pulled up into a bun on the top of her head. I am sorry, she said, her accent clinging to the words. I hired a new assistant yesterday, and he still needs some practice. Your patience would be very appreciated. Sarah smiled, her effortless charm making my heart beam with pride at the fact that I might get to lead beside her one day. Of course, she said brightly. I'm rather good at cooking and could help. No, no. Marlene looked horrified as she continued, that would be incredibly improper. I will have the food ready soon, I promise. And then she was gone again, lightning fast. Sarah just stared at the door she left through, a dazed look on her face. Improper? She finally asked quietly. Are you guys like royalty or something? A chuckle broke free, and an even more confused look graced her features. No, not royalty, I said. Marlene is just quite fond of new guests, and she hates disappointing them in the food department. She made a humming sound, face contemplating as she looked to the door again. So, how many people live in this giant building? I smiled, loving that she was getting more comfortable here and asking questions. Well, despite its size, it's only Marlene, my head cook. Kara, my head maid. Rowan, when he pleases. Tristan, if he feels up to it, and then just a few other people who help around with the upkeep. Her eyes looked odd as she asked, then why is it so big? This place could house like 100 people if you wanted. I glanced around the place with an appreciation that appeared any time I took a second to stop and look. I don't know why it's so big. It was built before even my father's father was born. It's been here forever. Maybe all of these rooms were filled at one point, but as time went on, people slowly started to trickle out. There was a kind of warmth in her gaze when I looked back that had tingles erupting up my neck, aware of every second her eyes stayed on my body. Aware of every ounce of attention she gave me. You talk with a sense of purpose, she started, cheeks turning the lightest shade of pink. Like no words can be wasted. Like every sentence is a story needing to be told. It's admirable. My heart throbbed, light and heavy all at once. My eyes drifted down without my permission, eyeing the plush pink lips I had denied myself the pleasure of looking at all morning, and her breath caught. My gaze lifted again, only to find that her eyes were staring at my lips, and I barely restrained a smirk from lifting as I leaned closer. Just one touch. One graze to ease the incessant desire eating away at my mind. One taste to lift the pressure of want from my heart. One brush to ease the fog of heat in my head. Just one. 2 perfect breakfasts coming through. Marlene announced as the door swung open. I settled back in my seat, ignoring the way my heart pulsed with disappointment. I snuck a glance to the side and was relieved to see that my disappointment was not one-sided. Good to know this attraction went both ways. Now we just needed to see how to expand it into something more. Sarah. It was the tingling that started at the base of my neck, and the whisper of a voice. A breeze that brushed my hair. And then the throb that settled on the stem of my spinal cord. I cringed, hand coming up to rub against the pulsing skin. I had excused myself from the breakfast table because my head had started to pound. I looked in the lit-up bathroom mirror, my eyes seeming to swirl, colors rolling and reflecting in a rainbow of chaos. My head began to pound harder, limbs prickling with needles of sleep even though I was standing up. Everything inside of me fought with what it once was and whatever was happening to me then. I slid down the bathroom wall, head in my hands as I tried to hold back a groan. It was like my head was splitting itself in two, the pain of it ripping apart almost too much. It was awful, it was. Hello. I gasped as everything stopped. The pain, the throbbing, the pulsing, the tingles and needles. Everything quieted for that voice. Did I end up with a mute? I looked up, down, around, left, right, sideways, backwards, and all over again. Can you hear me? It was coming from inside my head. Yes? I tried out, contemplating whether or not I needed to be assessed in an asylum. Wonderful. I've been trapped in here for so long that I thought I would never speak to life again. You have no idea how much your voice comforts me right now. Oh my gosh. Someone was talking inside of my head. There was an actual voice inside my head that was not mine. Was I crazy? Dreaming? Delirious? Overwhelmed? Stressed? Making up voices in my head because of loneliness? What are you? I asked, cringing at the encouragement I was putting into this weirdness. A giggle sounded, and I jumped up, so scared that my legs shook and I almost fell right back down. Why, I'm your wolf, of course. Wait. What did she just say? Was it hot in here? I felt like maybe it was a little too warm. I had never been claustrophobic before, but I think the development had occurred. This bathroom was too small, too cramped. There was no air, no room to breathe. A knock sounded, but was it in my head? I was going crazy. I had to be. There was no other explanation at this point other than to think. Sarah? Ryan's voice asked from the other side of the door, and something primal tipped my gut. What the heck was wrong with me? You all right in there? He asked. I was not, but my voice wouldn't work. My mouth was so busy trying to get air in and out that words had no room to form. Panic was a living, breathing thing inside of me, taking all my comfort and peace and replacing it with chaos and destruction. Al? I wished I could answer him. Wished this stupid voice inside my head would go away so I could stop having to shove it out. It was like trying to lift a box of concrete and throw it out the window. It was too heavy, my hands too weak. I couldn't get rid of it, couldn't get rid of the words it uttered. Sarah, can you hear me? Panic passed in his words, fear threading through its cracks. Wolf. I had a wolf inside my head. A wolf that was pushing against the walls I was trying so hard to keep up. A wolf that was making the pounding in my head come back. I had a wolf inside my head. I was no better than my father. I was no better than everyone I had called monsters. Creatures. Cruel. Inhuman. Disgusting. All of it. I was all of it. My father's daughter, and my mother's biggest disappointment. Maybe that was why she left. Maybe she ran, terrified of the monster she made without knowing. Terrified of me. The door crashed open with a splintering crack, the hinges barely hanging on and the wood chipping and fluttering to the ground. Pieces of a puzzle ripped apart. Hands were on my face in an instant. Words were spoken, whispered, and then yelled in my ears. Ringing was all I heard. Ringing in my head like a bell hit too many times. The chimes of a clock as it hit its numbers. My shoulders shook, but I couldn't see who was in front of me. It was all blurred. The edges of my vision were a crisp midnight black that was seeping into my lenses, the color bleeding until all I saw was the night sky, welcoming me into a dreamless sleep. I jolted upright with a gasp, my eyes searching everything around me, adrenaline still fast and hot in my veins as I. Whoa there, a deep voice I knew all too well spoke. Let's take this a little slower, okay? He gently led my body back into a slightly lying down, slightly sitting up position, and I finally recognized where we were. A hospital. Did they think I was crazy? Insane? Did they not all have talking wolves inside their heads as well? What is? Hey, sweetheart, Ryan's gentle voice said, bringing me back. Look at me. The command wasn't rough. It rolled off his tongue and settled in my stomach like a hot rock. What were these thoughts? The thoughts of a mating pair. Not you again. I groaned. Sarah, Ryan said, still gentle, still patient. Look at me, please. My eyes trailed over to his, lulling green instantly making my heart settle. Can you tell me what happened earlier? I swallowed, the air in my lungs growing thick and clogged. I don't know, I whispered, even though I was almost certain I did. I don't understand. Yes you do, my wolf remarked. He nodded, his hand reaching to brush against mine. That's completely fine, he reassured. Why don't you lead me through the steps and I can try to help you understand? You think I'm crazy, I said, holding his eyes. That's why I'm here, isn't it? His eyebrows went down, a shocked look exploding on his face. No, of course not. He said quickly. You're here because your face was turning blue. The oxygen in your body was fading faster than you could draw it. You weren't breathing, Sarah. His eyes seemed to shudder with the memory as he added, we almost lost you. If it weren't for Arlo, you wouldn't be here right now. An exhale stuttered out of my lungs. Oh, I whispered, barely audible. His thumb drew a pattern on my hand, and my focus drifted, trying to figure out what it was. I would never think you're crazy, Elle. And if I ever did, the first thing I would do is try to talk through it with you, not toss you into a hospital. The butterflies in my stomach ripped free of their cage, and flutters erupted against my insides. How did I get lucky enough to stumble upon your land? I whispered, eyes locked on his. His lips tipped up as he said, the same reason I got lucky enough to find you in my pack. His face leaned closer as he said, fate. There's someone in my head. I blurted. Did you just ruin a perfectly hot moment by saying I'm simply a person in your head? Shut up, I grumbled. His face looked confused for a second before he nodded slowly, eyes squinting just a little. Okay, he said, calculated. How did you find that out? In the bathroom, I said, rubbing my eyes and trying to keep the shaking out of my voice. It all started with this pain in my head, and then it just started incessantly throbbing. It was awful, but then it all stopped when a voice spoke inside my head. I think, my hands rubbed harder on my forehead like they were trying to push the information away. I think I might have a wolf inside my head right now. He was quiet for a moment, and I think, this was the moment he would pronounce me insane because I was human, there was no way I could have a wolf, but then he asked, you think? I blew out a breath, my eyes tracking the white paint on the ceiling as I whispered, I know I do. His thumb continued its movement on my hand, and I decided I never wanted it to move. It would make a lot of sense, considering who your dad is. I nodded because it did. It wouldn't make sense that the offspring of a wolf wouldn't also be a wolf. I stopped abruptly, my mind whirling with revelations I wished I didn't know. I didn't say anything about my dad being a wolf, I whispered, eyes searching his. His jaw worked as he closed his eyes. Sarah, he started, but I didn't let him finish. Why do you keep lying? I asked, a lump forming in my throat. His eyes snapped open before he asked, keep? Sarah, I haven't lied about. I know, Nolix. I interrupted. I know you're a werewolf too. Ryan. Her eyes. Her eyes were so full of betrayal, of distrust and disappointment. So full of pain. I had put that there. I made her trust me just for the rug to be pulled away, and now she saw everything that was underneath. No more lies, no more secrets. Everything had been displayed in front of her, waiting for an explanation. I was still trying to wrap my head around the fact that she was a wolf, and now I had to explain why I was hiding my wolf, and why I was hiding the way I knew her dad was a wolf. It was a mess. Sarah, I started, calm, even, balanced. No one in this forest is a human. Rogues or the other creatures that live out there smell them immediately if they get in here. They won't survive more than a night here. That's why you were such a surprise, but I guess it all makes sense now. Because I have a wolf, she stated reluctantly. I nodded, my thumb still rubbing lazily along her hand. It was calming me and probably her, so I would keep it there as long as she would let me. So. Kyler, Rowan? They're wolves too. I nodded with a grim expression, cringing inside at all the lies that were unraveling before her. But they only lied because I made them, I amended. Nobody here has lied to you intentionally. Her eyes locked with mine, betrayal and tears glistening within them. Except you, she whispered. An exhale shoved its way out of my mouth as I ran a hand through my hair. Just me, but I only did it to protect you, I explained, holding her eyes as I pushed sincerity into the words. She let out a weak laugh that held no humor. That's the same thing my father said to me on the other side of my cage, she said bitterly, face twisting in anger. Why does protection have to be wrapped in lies? What does withholding the truth do to keep me safe? What does not knowing you're a wolf do to protect me? My eyes traced the pattern I drew on her hand as I asked, does knowing my true self make you afraid? Did finding out about your father make you scared? Her throat worked with a swallow before she whispered, yes. My wolf rioted in my head, pounding on the brick wall I had made. I pushed him away just as I had been doing since Sarah came. It wasn't fair. So to answer your question, I was protecting myself, not you. I didn't want you to be scared of what I could be, and instead get to know what I am. She looked to her lap as a weak scoff left her lips. I already told you that I don't see you as a monster. I still don't. You just won't listen, she explained frustratedly. Yes, I'm scared, but not of you. I'm scared of the unknown. I'm scared of the lies I keep finding. I've never been scared of you, Ryan, and I would have listened had you cared to talk, except instead of trusting me with the truth, you made me trust you with lies. Ouch. You're right, I did lie. I have no excuses, no reason to defend myself other than I'm a selfish individual who should have been more open with you when it was clear you trusted me. I'm so sorry, Sarah. She let another weak laugh free. This is such a mess, she groaned. I don't know what to do anymore. My father is a rogue leader, my mother is on the other side of the planet, my only home is probably stolen by now, and I have nothing left to fight for. She looked out the window as she added, my father was what kept me going, and now that he's... I don't even know. The crack in her voice broke me. The single action of a shaky sigh leaving her lips made me want to murder anything that had ever touched her. Sarah, I gently pulled her face back over to meet my gaze, and I threw as much emotion into my words as I could. There is so much more to life than finding the next ladder to climb. You are so much more than a pawn in a game of chess. You are a person, not an object. Your father made you play a part nobody should have to even consider. You are the strongest, bravest, most capable woman I have ever met, and I will not let you give up just because your future is uncertain. I moved my other hand until both of my palms were cupping her face. You have a place here, and you always will. The future isn't meant to be clear or planned. It's just meant to be enjoyed. It's not hard to find things to fight for, Elle, and I'm right here if you need help looking. Her half-sob half-laugh was all I heard before her body was molding around mine, arms squeezing my neck like a lifeline. You are just a big teddy bear on the inside, you know that? She asked. I wrapped my arms securely around her, relief pouring through my veins at the branch she was offering. Only ever with you, I whispered. She dug her nose deeper into the crook of my neck, whispering, I'm okay with that. My wolf purred. I'm sorry, since when did you develop cat tendencies? I asked him. You never let me enjoy anything, he grumbled back. Sarah gasped suddenly, her hand shooting to touch the back of her neck as she pulled away. It wasn't a tracking device. He said it was, but it wasn't. My brows furrowed as I asked, what are you talking about? Who? She turned her wide brown eyes on me and said, Foxley. The pain in my head. He said it was because he planted a tracking device in my neck, but that's where this whole thing started. I think he brought out my wolf somehow. A tracking device? I asked skeptically. He knew exactly where you were in my pack, so why would he need to track you? Exactly. Her face turned thoughtful as she added, but that would mean that he knew my wolf was dormant in the first place, which leads me to believe that he probably had a hand in that as well. She shook her head with an incredulous look. The lies from him just keep coming. Hey, I said softly, prompting her attention back to me. We're going to figure this out. You aren't alone anymore. We are going to get through this. One step at a time, okay? She smiled faintly, but I would take anything other than sadness at that point. Okay, she said. So that's what the whole eyes glazing over means? Sarah asked as we walked through the pack house. You're just talking to your wolf? I nodded as I led her around to the gym. After our conversation in the hospital, Arlo had come in and deemed her good to go, including her wrist, which he said she should still be careful with but was otherwise healed. It was strange that it took this long to heal considering she was a wolf, but I wasn't about to worry her with that. Talking to my wolf and my pack, I replied, stopping on the black mats lining the floor as we entered the gym. We have this thing called mind linking. It's a link through which we can all communicate. Kinda like a cell phone in your head, except you can only link the people within your pack. She hummed as her eyes roamed the room. Being a wolf is pretty neat, she muttered. I smiled. There are perks. She planted her hands on her hips and looked at me before saying, Is there a certain reason you brought me to the gym? Are you trying to tell me something? My wolf growled low in my head, and I almost laughed out loud. I put my hands up in mock surrender as I said, You're the one who asked for a tour. This just happened to be the first place I entered. Why can't I feel her wolf? My wolf asked. It was strange that the only thing she had right now was a voice inside her head, but I was trying to stay calm about it. Maybe whatever her father did took a couple more days to release the effects. Why is no one in here? Sarah asked. I walked over to the weight bench and said, Rowan and Tristan prefer to work out at night, and besides them and me, no one in this house uses it. I sat down on the black padding and looked over at her. You know how to spot someone? Her eyes narrowed and she asked, what are you doing? Anything and everything to get your mind off worrying. You didn't think these muscles just appeared, did you? Her gaze turned mischievous. Okay, show off. What can you bench? 100? I smirked, getting up to change out the weights and sitting back down. Her eyes tracked my every move, and my smirk tilted higher. She stayed on the other side of the room, so I lay back and started a set of reps. I kept going until she walked over, eyes bulging as she looked at the weight I had. 450? There's no way. My smirk was plastered to my face, not moving a single inch as I gestured for her to try. See for yourself, I said, a challenge lighting my voice. She eyed me for a minute before sighing and moving forward. Except, instead of going to the other side, she carefully maneuvered herself so her legs were straddling the bench in front of me. Her eyes lit with a smirk as she looked back at me. Damn, she was adorable. Her smirk quickly morphed into incredulity as she tried with everything she had to lift the bar. I expected her to give up after the first try, but she was completely determined, her arms straining as she willed the bar to lift. It didn't, and before I could take another breath, her momentum threw her backwards. Right into my lap. Sarah. I feel like if you unintentionally ended up on top of someone 2 times in one day, the universe was trying to say something. The feel of Ryan's hands gripping my hips and his breath brushing my neck definitely seemed like something was being said. You all right? He asked, and tingles ran through my body. I nodded, my eyes narrowing as I tried not to pant. Just jump him. My wolf demanded. Something I knew was desire shocked my system, and I turned my body in his arms, locking eyes with his green ones. Waiting for you to kiss him is like watching paint dry. My wolf, I said, breathless, has very interesting ideas on what we should do in this position. His eyebrows rose, but nothing except heat was written in his gaze. I think my wolf mirrors her sentiments, he replied, eyes dropping before lifting back up and sighing. And as much as I would love to fulfill their requests, we have a lot to talk about. And a tour to finish. He kissed my forehead before standing and offering me his hand. My skin was blazing where his lips touched, and everything inside of me was begging for more, but I knew he was right. I grabbed his hand, pulling myself into a standing position and brushing non-existent dust from my pants before following him out the door. As it turned out, the massiveness of the pack house on the outside doesn't even begin to tell you of the massiveness on the inside. There was one of everything, like an entire town in one building. Do you ever go anywhere? I asked as we entered another hallway. You have everything in here. Ryan chuckled before saying, not everything, and you haven't even seen the best part yet. He opened a white door on the left as he added, well, I consider it the best part. I haven't shown anyone else. Warmth spread like wildfire through my chest, and I donned a stupid grin as I followed him through the door. It was another dark hallway, but it didn't take long until a second white door was opened, and I gasped as I entered behind him. It was a glass-encased wonderland. Flowers of every single shade you could think of dotted the ground in a colorful chaos of petals. Sunlight poured through transparent walls of light, and brightness radiated in every corner. Vines of intricate green climbed the walls, and little flowers were starting to bloom on each one. It was immaculate. It's beautiful, I breathed, awestruck. He put his hands in his pockets as he glanced around the room with a smile. My mother was quite fond of greenhouses and flowers. I made this in her honor. My grin only grew, surely taking up my entire face now. See? I said to him. A big old teddy bear. He rolled his eyes, but a light smile still rested on his lips. How did we end up with such a wonderful mate? My wolf asked. It was weird, but I thought I could feel her swooning. What's a mate? I asked. Incredulous confusion filled my head, but it wasn't mine. You don't know what a mate is? Would I be asking if I did? I asked frustratedly. It's your soulmate, she stated, like it was supposed to be the most obvious thing in the world. The person you spend eternity with. Have you ever read a book with wolves in it? They have mates, and since the 2 individuals in this room are wolves, you both have a mate, and it just so happens to be each other. Okay, I snapped. I get it. I knew what an animal mate was, and I guess it would only make sense that werewolves had them, but it was still crazy to wrap my head around. What's wrong? Ryan asked, and it was then that I realized I had been staring at the glass walls with a frown on my face. I shook myself before saying, my wolf, she. I cleared my throat as I collected my thoughts and asked, are we mates? His throat worked on a swallow and he rubbed his jaw as discomfort filled his face. Yes, we are, he said like no explanation was needed. My brows furrowed as I asked, why didn't you tell me? At first, it was because you were human, but then as I started to get to know you, I felt differently. But I didn't want to make you feel pressured into starting something with me. I wanted you to like me for me, not because fate told you had to. I wanted to build a relationship outside of the laws. If you're mad, can you do it after we jump into his arms? Because that was the sexiest thing anyone has ever said, my wolf said, practically purring with desire. So you wanted to break the rules? I asked, slowly walking forward. His eyes shuddered, heat flooding his gaze as he replied, rules don't seem to exist when you're around, so yes, I wanted to break the rules. I stopped right in front of him. Is fate the reason I see fire swirling in your eyes? I asked huskily. His hands came to rest on my hips, and lava seeped into my skin from his touch. Fate has nothing to do with the way I feel right now. The feelings I have are not because of a stupid bond. They are purely because of the beautiful woman standing in front of me. Because of her spark, her confidence, her boldness, and her insistence on finding good where there is none. My feelings are because of you. I grinned. Hey, Nolix? His hands roamed up to cup my cheeks. Yes, Sarah? I gripped the collar of his shirt as I said, I just found my reason to fight. And then I kissed him. The pressure of his lips finally landing on mine was like a thunderstorm after years of drought. It felt electric and calm all at once. My fingers moved up until I was sticking my hands in his hair, gripping the strands like a lifeline, unsure if I would ever be able to rise out of the ocean that was him. His lips moved against mine like he needed them to live, and only when air demanded an entrance did we pull apart, gasping. He rested his forehead against mine with a giant smile, and I couldn't help but do the same. I don't know how I ever survived before you. He said breathlessly. I chuckled. Same here. But then his face turned pensive, all of his muscles bunching with tension. Kyler says rogues are attacking at the border. His look turned somber as he added, your father is with them. Chaos was all I saw as we stepped outside the wall that encircled Ryan's pack. Everyone was fighting. The air was filled with the noises of shouting men and grunting fighters. It was violent and brutal and merciless. And my father stood in the middle of it all, face completely emotionless as he dropped soldiers left and right without even twitching. Stop it! I yelled as I charged towards him. His gaze swiveled to me, focus lost for 1 second, but the soldier creeping up on him didn't even get a finger to touch him before he was grasping at his throat, skin turning blue as he dropped to the ground like a stone. A thump sounded beside me, and I jumped as Ryan speared his sword through another rogue trying to get too close. Take this, he said to me, planting a dagger in my palm. And stay with me. Your daughter's status didn't stop him before, and I doubt it will now. I nodded as I secured the weapon in my hand, eyeing my father as he continued to ambush people. I need to get close to him. Maybe he'll stop if I talk it out with him. Ryan dropped another rogue without even blinking before he said, you can try, but that little party trick he has going on has always been unpredictable, and I don't want him hurting you. I'll be careful, I promised. I started walking towards Foxley, the dagger in my hand going cold as I thought about using it on him. He was so far gone that I didn't even see my father anymore. A murderer stood before me, and I would do whatever it took to stop him from hurting people. What are you doing? I shouted at him. He turned slightly, but then a wolf pounced on him and his attention was back on killing. This forest has taken too much from me, he snarled. So I'm taking something back. This isn't right. Look around you. Everything you've lost was because of the selfish heart you made to keep it. Selfishness is what gets you things in life. No one ever won a good hand because they played fair. He was that far gone. My father no longer resided in this creature. You created a monster within yourself, and I won't stand by to watch you kill innocent people. I tried to rush forward, but a giant gust of wind knocked me on my back, the air pinning my body to the ground as I gasped for the air that had left me. Sarah! Ryan screamed. Foxley scoffed. Foolish child. Love was my downfall, but I will make sure it isn't yours. The air let up, and I scrambled to stand as Foxley's attention shifted to Ryan. Ryan dropped to the ground within seconds, his hands clawing at the tender skin of his throat. No. I shouted. I barely had time to think about what I was doing as I rushed toward my father, and I knew that I didn't think as I shoved my blade through his back. Sarah. To LB Bunny. No one is more enthusiastic about this book than you. Thank you. I looked at my hands, still clutching the handle of the knife. The knife protruding from my father's back. He made a choked sound, his knees hitting the ground with a thump. I dropped to my knees beside him, my shaking hands covering my mouth as I watched the scene I created play out. I couldn't pause it, couldn't rewind it in hopes of a different ending, so I just watched, helpless. I'm so sorry, I sobbed. His eyes found mine, and to my utter horror, he smiled. I don't blame you, little flower. You only did what was right, he rasped, right before his body fell limp to the ground. Keep your hands away from her, Ryan growled, and I looked up to find him right beside me, holding a sword ready to strike. Quint? I gasped, throwing myself in between them. Don't kill him. He was the one who helped me escape the rogue camp. Ryan's eyes narrowed on Quint before he reluctantly let his sword down. His strong arms were around me a minute later, and I relaxed instantly into his warm embrace. I'm so sorry you had to do that, he whispered into my hair. Don't be. I gave him a watery smile, its edges shaking slightly. My father made a choice. Quint cleared his throat, and I turned around to face him, my eyes fighting with my brain as I desperately tried to avoid looking at the body a couple of feet from us. On behalf of the rest of the rogues who survived today, we would like to thank you. Our pack owes you a favor, called in at any time of your choosing. My eyes widened. You don't have to do that, I rushed to say. He was my responsibility. No, Quint interrupted. Our fathers are supposed to be caregivers, not responsibilities. You did what not many dared to even attempt, including myself, and for that, I, and so many others, are forever grateful. My chest felt tighter than a string in a game of tug-of-war as I put out my hand. Quint took it, shaking on the favor they owed, and I smiled at him as I let go. Are you the new alpha? I asked. He looked around at the small group gathering behind him, the violence done now that the enemy dropped their weapons. It appears to be that way. I beamed proudly at him as I said, you will make an excellent leader and an outstanding dad. He grinned at me before bowing his head. Thank you, he looked behind him with a nod before adding, we must go, but I hope we see each other again, Sarah. I look forward to our next meeting, Quint. He winked, and then wolves were in front of me. I tried not to gasp as they disappeared in a matter of seconds. They never made killing blows, Ryan said softly, staring at the empty air the rogues occupied. All of my men informed me that, unless given direct orders from Foxley, they only defended themselves. I wrapped my arms around his waist and rested my chin on his chest before saying, not all villains are terrible people. Some are just big old teddy bears. Ryan. 24 soldiers down and 6 badly injured, Tristan recounted, emotionless like he was reading the morning paper, but I knew every single soldier that suffered put a pierce in his chest, as it did mine. How's Rowan doing? I asked. I still couldn't believe he fell victim to Foxley's hand and nobody knew until he almost took his last breath. Rowan wouldn't be here right now if Kyler hadn't distracted Foxley. His oxygen levels came back up once Arlo did his thing. He's expected to be good as new by tomorrow. I nodded. Good. The door opened then, and I looked to find my favorite person standing on the other end. Sorry to bother you, Sarah started. But Arlo said that he needs you in the infirmary. Rowan is insisting on getting up. I rolled my eyes, but a smile made it onto my face anyway. I stood before saying, looks like tomorrow morning came early. Tristan chuckled. With Rowan, you never know. Sarah. 2 weeks later. I don't think it's supposed to be this hard, I groaned. Ryan smirked, and I already knew what he was going to say even before he said, that's what she said. I glared. You are a child, and I think what you are referring to is supposed to be hard. He choked, and I smirked. Seconds later his arms were picking me up and swinging my body to the side. You little tease, he said with a laugh. Hey! You started it. My feet finally touched the ground again, and I turned around to punch him in the gut. He was unfazed, of course. Even with my newborn wolf strength, I was no match for him. As it turned out, whatever my father had done to me just needed a few more days to activate fully, and now I could do everything a wolf could. Except, well, shift. It is very possible that you're only half wolf. Your mother was a human, so the odds of you being born a full werewolf are catastrophically low, Ryan said as if hearing my thoughts. I sighed, blowing a loose curl out of my eyes in the process. You're right. I guess I'll have to settle for your wolf's back. He does give pretty good rides. My eyes widened as I realized the trap I had set for myself, but instead of saying the words I expected, Ryan just smirked before saying, I know someone who can do way better. And then his lips were on mine. Perfect. Magical. And best of all? Mine. Ryan. Nix. 10 years later. The feeling of a summer breeze blowing at my face and the dirt ground pounding beneath my paws was one of the best feelings I had ever experienced. I felt the most free and relaxed when I let my wolf loose, and it was something I couldn't do very often. I shifted behind a tree and got dressed, just finishing the buttons on my shirt when a body jumped onto my back from behind. Daddy, look! My daughter exclaimed, obstructing my view with a picture that looked exactly like a rainbow had thrown up. I boosted her higher up on my back before asking, It's beautiful. Did you make it all by yourself? I started walking back to the house as Akari said, Yes I did, and I even gave you a mustache. For once I like her drawing. It looks exactly like you, my wolf said smugly. Well, guess who's not getting a run tomorrow? You wouldn't dare, he growled. Watch me, I countered. And that's your wolf. Akari added as she pointed to a splotch of black off to the side. I smirked. The color isn't even accurate. My wolf whined. My wolf says he loves it, I told her as we walked through the door. After deciding to start a family, Sarah insisted we get a house for ourselves. One that didn't include Rowan or Tristan fighting every 5 minutes. I agreed, so I had a little cottage built in a secluded patch of forest near the south side of the border to our pack. It had a massive greenhouse, of course, and Sarah surprised me on my birthday by putting a wooden engraved sign of my mom's name up in the back. It was one of the sweetest things anyone had ever done for me. It was probably the reason she was pregnant again. Akari jumped off my back and ran up the stairs as soon as I shut the door, yelling, Mommy, he likes it. Does that mean we can frame this one? Thomas, Akari's twin and senior by 7 minutes, sat in his usual spot by the window, a book resting in front of his face as always. Hey, buddy, I greeted as I came around to ruffle his hair. What's the book about today? He didn't even look up as he muttered, Dragons. You think maybe we could find one in real life? I asked. He finally looked up with a spark in his eyes. Would you help me look? I made an incredulous face before saying, Of course. I don't think Nolix is strong enough to defend you if you happen to find one, Sarah said as she came down the stairs. I probably need to come too. A stupid grin split my face as I walked toward her, my arms encircling her waist and breathing in the scent of my favorite flower, dahlias. How was your morning run? She asked as her arms came to rest on my shoulders. It was good, but it would have been better with you. She laughed, gesturing at her swollen stomach as she said, I doubt baby here would appreciate being jostled around that much. I sighed dramatically, but I was beaming on the inside at the thought of meeting my third child in 3 months. I love you, I said as my lips brushed hers. I love you too, she said, and then her lips pressed on mine. EWWW. Akari yelled as she jumped down the last step of the stairs. Thomas. They're doing it again. No. Thomas groaned. Not again. They squirmed their way in between us until we were separated by the cutest twins in the world. I may have been a tiny bit biased. Do you know what denying me kisses means? I asked warningly. Nope. They both giggled. It means, I crouched down to their level. Tickles. They both erupted in laughter as I poked their sides, and Sarah joined in tickling their necks. Stop, stop. They both begged, breathless. All right, I relented, putting up my hands in surrender. I'll stop. Are you guys ready for breakfast after all that giggling? Sarah asked, walking into the kitchen. Yes, please. They both shouted. I smiled, watching as they sat in their seats and argued over who got the blue placemat. It was crazy to think that I thought my mate didn't exist, and now I was living my dream life with her. Making a family with her. I would never want for anything, because everything I would ever need was right here in this room. Honey, I'm home. Rowan shouted as he opened the door. You're blocking the entrance, dumbass. Let me in. Tristan barked. You guys fight like an old married couple, Kyler muttered. You act more childish than the 7-year-old twins inside, Marlene grumbled. Now move before I dump this casserole on you. She definitely will, Kia warned. Well, I guess not everything,